To the round 2 of the 2020 Town of Fairfield budget hearings for the Board of Finance. Would everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Since tonight is Education Night, I'm going to ask our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Jones, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, as everybody can see behind us, we have a presentation that the superintendent's going to give. This is an annual tradition. So Jim and I think Mary will step out of the way. And the floor is yours, Dr. Jones.
Thank you.
Do you want to log out or leave it on, you think?
Thank you, Chairman Flynn and members of the Board of Finance. I'm Tony Jones, School Superintendent, and tonight I'd like to present our 2019-2020 proposed school board budget. I'm going to start out with just a little bit of our Fairfield student demographics, just because I think it's always good as a refresher. First of all, this is based on our October 1 count, where we have 9,986 students, and that is every student who's actually funded in our school district. Our pre-K number is the only number on the screen that's actually an estimated, because pre-K enrolls all year long, and you can also see magnet students and outplaced students. Again, these are all students that are funded in our system. Next, we're looking at our English language learners. This is an area since 2013-14 that has grown steadily for us. It was a little bit of a welcome relief this year, just to grow by a few students, so that we really had an extra year to fine-tune our skill set in working with our English language learners. On the bottom left, you're seeing the students eligible for free and reduced meals. This percentage is usually closer to 8%. And it's not that we have grown tremendously in this demographic, it's that now we are required through our Medicaid to actually bill for Medicaid. And in doing that, there is an automatic eligibility for free and reduced if they qualify for that Medicaid. So this is a good thing in many ways, in that it does impact things like Title I funding. And last of all, we have our graduation rate. We don't have our current one from this last year, but it is trending in the right direction with strong graduation rate. If you've been watching the board meetings over the last few months, you know that preschool enrollment is escalating, really climbing quickly. It is required by federal law for children who have special needs, and what you're seeing is how that has trending to a projected high next year of 186 students. We've already moved part of our program off-site. We will have more classes off-site next year. And when I say off-site, that's ECC Ward and ECC Stratfield. This is just a glimpse of the 15-year historical enrollment, and you'll see there's not a lot of ebb and flow. Yes, it goes up, it's come down a little bit, but it's staying fairly constant. And as a reminder, you saw this slide last year. This is a slide showing you what is happening with K-5 enrollment. And our K-5 enrollment is slightly down, and it will start climbing back up again. When you look at our middle school enrollment, you'll notice middle school is at a high point right now. That large group next year in 2019-20, which is the second bar from the left, there's a large group of 8th graders that will then go to the high school. They'll come down for a little while before they start climbing again. Our high school enrollment is at a peak right now. And just keep in mind that high school is one of our most expensive areas in our budget, not only for things like chemistry labs and the materials and supplies that we need, but the other thing to notice, if you look at 2018-19, it's slightly higher than next year. However, that's the actual, and we were supposed to be slightly lower. But our enrollment in high school was up this year, and that was attributed largely to the migration from 8th to 9th and students who chose to stay with us this year and not go to private school. This just gives you a glance of, again, how enrollment does go up and down. And you'll see when one starts trending down, the other starts trending up. So the district is really not expected to be in a lull when you look at us going out through 2027, 2028. This is a little bit of our teacher and staff demographics. We have a total of 1,535 employees. And of those employees, 53% live in Fairfield. And this is a percentage that a lot of people have found to be higher than what they anticipated. And 90% live in Fairfield, Bridgeport, Trumbull, Stratford, or Milford. And really what this tells us is that when we are paying our teachers or paying our staff, most of those salary dollars are going back into our local economy, which is a great thing. Not all of Fairfield County looks like this. We'll also take a look just at out of our 1,003 certified staff members. This is very impressive. We have 49 with a bachelor's degree, and everybody else has a master's degree higher than a master's or a doctorate. We have an extremely highly qualified staff. When we look at staff salaries, this year we're looking at a total proposed increase of 4.6, and again, this is all of our staff, not just one group. Compared to 2018-19, that's an increase of 3.17. And again, that's all of our staff, 1,541 full-time equivalent. We do have 6 different bargaining groups. And I'd just like to point out that Fairfield School is the largest employer in Fairfield. A lot of people don't realize what a large organization we are. When you look at why we have a large budget, it's because we're big. We're also one of the 100 largest employers in all of Fairfield County. In looking at our proposed budget, this pie chart does not change a lot from year to year. The green is staff salaries, that's all of our staff. You'll see the pink in benefits, and then you see operations and maintenance. That's where most of our budget goes. We have to operate extremely efficiently in order to have the money that we need for our instruction in the classroom. This is a PPE, which is per pupil expenditure chart, that if you saw this presentation when I presented to the board, we were using 2016-17 because the 17-18 had not come out. Just recently, we now had that available. And what you're seeing is that we were just below the average when we were presenting this last year and the beginning of this year. And the difference between where we are with that yellow color and the average that is in black is right around about $14 million difference. We would have $14 million more in our budget. As of last year, we have fallen one more spot where both Norwalk and Stamford are just above us, below the average. When we look at our salaries, this is one of the main drivers in our budget this year. And this is just to remind, the school district is a little bit different in what goes into our salary line. There's existing teaching staff, we have our replacement staff, part-time employment, we have longevity, degree changes. There are a lot of components to that one item. Another large driver to our budget this year is our benefits. This is not unusual. However, we do have a $1.4 million in just health insurance alone. We're still very happy that we're with Connecticut 2.0. A 6-point percentage increase is very reasonable when we look at what a lot of our other districts are facing who are not with Connecticut 2.0. And then we also have increases in our operations this year. On the far left, you see utilities, and there's quite a detailed page in the back of the budget book for you this year, because that's a question we've had over the last couple of years. Why are utilities going up? We do have a $500,000 just in that utility line. You're also seeing this year we have an increase in our maintenance projects, and we've increased maintenance projects by about $500,000. But again, over on that right-hand side, we're still not anywhere near where we were in 2016-17 as we've tried to run efficiently and do everything that we need to do for the school system. But we are trying to trend that back up this year. Our technology capital, we talked about this when we were before you for the quarterly, that we are trending in the right direction for our technology capital, working to run more efficiently, and the price point for our devices have been brought down. We're really doing a good job in our technology capital area. The Board of Finance asked a lot of questions actually on the quarterly about supplies, texts, and materials, which we appreciated. Concerned that maybe we were, cutting too much from that area. This is primarily attributed to the Next Generation Science Standards, and we don't have a large content area up for review this year, so we were able to reduce some of our supplies, text, and material area. And this slide is one that we're very, very proud because we are one of the few school districts in the state that can say we're really seeing some progress with our special education funding. And when you look at our outplacements, we're trending in the right direction. And we're doing that because we are building programs making a difference for students. And if you look down in the bottom, we just gave you a little scenario that this program, and this scenario is based on 25 students, how much it costs to run the program is just over $500,000. It does add staff, it does add cost to the budget. However, if those 25 students were outplaced, that cost at a minimum would be right around $1.6 million. And that is if the cost was only $65,000, and our average cost this year is averaging $114,000. And I will tell you, since we put the budget book together, we are up to almost 50 students. So you can almost double that number, and that's a minimum number. The other thing that we've done this year is we have 2 self-imposed audits. And I say they're self-imposed because the Board of Education and staff are really working to try to be as efficient as we can. And we went through a special education audit to say, is our eligibility in line with other districts? We asked some really hard questions. They spent a lot of time in our district. Yes, our eligibility is in line. We also asked if our initial placement process was efficient. We wanted feedback on that, and they told us we could use some improvement. And there are some things in the budget to help us do that this year. And are we trending in the right direction for providing in-house services? Yes. And again, that's why you're seeing that tuition line, not $1.3 million or $1.4 million increase this year. We also performed the Troy and Banks utilities and phone audit and looked at, are we being billed appropriately and are utility payments in order? And this really came out of a lot of discussion we had at this table last year, trying to understand, could there be something wrong with our billing? Is it just the rates? Really making sure we were looking thoroughly. And yes, we are being billed appropriately and our payments are in order, which was a good thing to hear. Overall, when you look at the changes at a glance, again, what's driving the budget, 4.99% requests this year are staff salaries and benefits, operations and maintenance of building. Everything else in our budget request this year is barely over 0.5%, 0.63%. And that includes those contracted services, transportation, some areas that can be large increases for us. And again, across the top, you're seeing the drivers, salaries, benefits, operations, utilities, and across the bottom are where we've really worked to be more efficient. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Appreciate it. Before we go into the book, I'm going to ask if there's any questions on the superintendent's presentation. Then I have a method to my madness about how we'll go through the book. Before I turn it over to questions, 2 comments. Number 1, please don't read anything into questions. Questions are just those questions. They're not necessarily challenges. They're not necessarily a line of thinking that we're going down for reductions or increases in spending, et cetera, et cetera. They are just questions. We're playing with taxpayers' money, i.e. other people's money, and it's our responsibility to ask questions as if it were all our own money. The second thing is we have the chairwoman of the Board of Education here, Ms. Vitale. Do you have anything you'd like to say before I open it up for questions?
Just thank you for for allowing us to present to you tonight. We didn't have this luxury at the Board of Selectmen. It was more of a question and answer. The board unanimously approved the budget that is before you, so I feel like I have the backing of my board behind me. We really guided staff to keep the focus on what is best for the educational well-being of our children, the health and safety of our children, and the health and safety of our staff. And I think that this budget reflects that, and look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you so much. Superintendent just got done with her presentation, so if there's any questions relevant to the presentation, we'll go to Ms. Zesma, and then we'll go to Ms. Smarmy, and then we'll go to Mr. Mottola, right in a row.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I'm sure we'll get into more detail on this particular area, but that's a huge decrease in the spending on special ed, which is great to see. Is that, so the current number of 539, I believe it was, is that net of adding staff? I remember we talked about trying to do more insourcing versus outsourcing, and that would require hiring new staff. So is that kind of net of that activity?
Yes, that actually puts the exact dollar amount we've spent on staffing, and then what it would have cost if we were outplacing those students.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Go ahead, Mrs. Marmion.
Thanks. That was one of my questions. Is there a direct correlation with the decrease in the outplacement of the students with the budget change? You know, we made budget increases last year to ensure that there were more, I believe, social workers in place, et cetera. So that's good. That was a real change for us. So that's accounted for savings. My other question is, I just want to get into the delayed maintenance issue that you brought up. I know that in past years, or you've stated that we delayed some maintenance and that we now want to play catch-up a little bit. Can you give us more specifics in terms of what those maintenance projects are that were delayed and what you are proposing that we put budget dollars towards for the next budget cycle?
Yeah, I think the key is with maintenance is that what's in the budget we feel like needs to be funded. And what you're seeing is, and we sent you, I believe, the packet on Friday that showed you the chart that had all of the maintenance projects in there. And if you look at that chart, I think I've got it right here just to make sure. And it looked like this. And basically what you're seeing on here is we go through and prioritize everything in the district every year. And first we start with everything that we believe needs to be done. Then we go through and we look at priority 1, priority 2, and priority 3. Priority 1's what we're really going to focus on, you know, to try to build into the budget. Then there are a certain amount of those priority 1's that they don't make the budget because it would be too large of a request. And back in I want to say 2016 or 2015, they were able to get about 800,000 of those projects in the budget. The last 2 years, that's an area that we have reduced from in order to be able to balance what we needed to do for the school district. This year, it's up about $500,000, trying to get more of those priority 1 projects done.
Can I just follow up?
And I want to follow up from you. Go ahead.
So in delaying the maintenance in the past several years, have we in fact increased our costs making up for whatever damage or issues that we're facing? And if so, is there a dollar amount that you can place against that?
Yeah, I don't think there's a dollar amount, and I don't think we would ever be able to fully fund everything that we need for maintenance. It's just, you know, that's one of the reasons we provided the list of the unanticipated. We've had $500,000 of unanticipated, and those aren't items where they're unanticipated, but there's a little bit extra in the budget just to try to cover those. Those projects this year are things that literally are not in the budget that Mr. Cullen has to go in and then figure out. Maybe we'll have a little bit in snow removal if we didn't have a bad winter, but generally it's making difficult choices. And I think anytime you put something off, there is a likelihood it could cost more, sure.
Okay, I'll defer to Mr. Flynn to...
Thank you. A couple of follow-ups on that. Okay, you just said there were some unanticipated, which happens every year, so the specifics might not be anticipated, but it is anticipated that there'll be some unanticipated spending each year, right? Were any of the projects that were budgeted to be completed on the maintenance list last year not completed because the money had to be diverted to more emergency scenarios?
No, last year it was a little bit different last year. I would say we were probably, and Mr. Cullen may disagree, I think last year was an easier year on the unanticipateds that we were dealing with during the year. Last year we had a budget shortage, so our maintenance was frozen. We managed to get all of those unfrozen by the end of the year. But we were also funding less projects than what this budget is requesting.
So step me through, and I don't need the exhaustive detail, but when you say that maintenance projects were delayed from the last few years, who made the call to delay those? Was that done at the administration level or at the Board of Education level?
It's done together, really, because this list that has priority 1's, you know, the board sees this. It's part of staff first do their work by saying, all right, is carpet worse in this building, or is it worse in this building? Does it have little kids sitting on the carpet when they roll around, and it's really needs to be replaced, or is it more older students? Yes, it's really worn out. Making those sort of priorities,
Right.
but everything that's on here, we literally go through, Mr. Cullen does it first with his whole team, then it comes to the central office team as we're building the budget, and we all, we have the hard conversations about, okay, let's go out and look at that one more time. Do we really need to replace it, and why? Then it goes to the board, and what gets in the budget ultimately is the balance of what we feel is reasonably we can afford, but we know we're not going to be able to do all of our priority ones.
But the board knows what all the priorities ones are, so they're familiar with, hey, these were all the priorities we had, these are the ones that we put into the budget.
I think if you go back over time, I would say not as much, but that you may feel differently. You've watched the budget process for years. And Mr. Collin, I don't know that we've given this every year. Do you feel like? Yes. Okay.
Okay. Last question on this. So you pointed out that, hey, the last couple of years, we've really tried to be diligent and cut back on Project Ones in deference to the overall budget. This year is a larger increase than we've seen in quite some time. Why wasn't there as much deference this year to that budget issue to pump this up to a 4.99, given what we were facing on the salary side and the other items?
Well, I think it's three things. I think it's the salaries, and again, that's not just one area of salaries. That was, which we walked Board of Finance through in the quarterly, was a very unusual salary year this year that actually builds into next year. The utilities, again, going up $500,000 just in utility line was a lot for us.
I'm
The
talking
maintenance,
specifically
I
the
know, I'm
maintenance.
just trying, but it all goes together, because when we build the budget, we have to pay the utilities. We know that's there. So certainly, we could have cut back on, materials and supplies, but when you're barely over half a percent, we felt like we have cut as much as we could, and this is the actual number we feel like we needed to sustain the district. If we have to go in and look at these projects again, we will, but we've put forward what we think we really need to be doing.
So I guess what I'm saying is, what was the bar for the projects to actually stay in this budget?
It literally is going project by project and having the discussion about, do we have to do this partial roof replacement? Can this VCT flooring hold off another year? And, from a superintendent perspective, I have to rely on Mr. Collin and his staff and their expertise about what's been put off for 2 years or 3 years, and what do we feel like really is going to be something that could fail the next year and cost more if we don't actually do the preventative on it.
So is that what this represents, Mr. Cullen? These are items that are at risk of failure within the next 12 months? Is that what we're to read into those comments? Welcome for the last time.
Yes,
Yes?
yes, it is.
You had to sit down to say one word? Yeah.
Well, for the
Go
record,
ahead.
with the cameras going.
No, go ahead, please. Expand on that just a little bit.
Well, we get a lot of requests from the principals and teachers and staff, that want painting or flooring or indoor air quality issues. So throughout the year, we build a huge master list of all those requests.
Yeah.
And then we go out and we walk them all and see just how bad they are and which ones would be a priority 1, 2, or 3 to get them into the chart.
So curious, how many priority ones are there, and how many made the list, and how many fell off?
I don't know them by heart, but we could count them.
There's 39 line items. There's 39 on this chart.
Yeah, and there's probably 12 that make it over 13.
So there's 27 that get pushed to the next year.
Well, they either get labeled a number 2, and then as the year goes on, we look at more requests coming in and see if they're
I'm
a
just
priority
really
one, but-
looking for the ones that were number 1 that didn't make it. That's what I'm curious about. Can we just
Yes,
get
they
that
either
listing?
get carried over to the next year, or they become a
Yeah.
number 2.
Yeah,
or
just
3.
because this is really the first time, I think, and I don't want to read into your question, Ms. Marmion, but when the budget first came out, we had heard about these delayed maintenance projects. And I know we all kind of looked at each other and said, delayed maintenance projects, we don't remember delaying any maintenance projects. Now, obviously, that's within your purview, I get it. But hearing that there was an additional spend and not having the knowledge that things were being pushed off was new information to us. Mr. Matola?
To add on to that, I kind of thought we were doing well with maintenance and that we were staying the course and maintaining. So I was a little surprised about it also.
We are in some areas. I mean, the preventive maintenance, we haven't cut at all, and that's critical. There's 8 preventive maintenance programs. They total almost $500,000. Those we haven't touched. Those are extremely important. But the maintenance projects themselves, the priority ones have always balanced around 1.2 to 1.6 million. We cut it back to about 800,000. Then, as Dr. Jones said, it goes through all the different teams, and eventually we end up with about 400,000 that gets into the budget.
I don't want to belabor the point, but if the preventative maintenance projects program is working so well, wouldn't we see that maintenance number on the critical path items come down each year? Why would it go up?
Well, it goes up because we add, we've added over 105,000 square feet of space to the school buildings, so they have to get incorporated into the PM program. So some of the PM's doing very well at some schools, and we do see a decrease, or the contractors will tell us, we're probably not going to need as much money on such and such a roof next year, but then we're adding in all the new HVAC equipment we've added to the schools, the additions, square footage, new controls, new fire protection, all that has to get added on, and we have to go meet with those contractors annually and say, we need to add these on and get quarterly, inspections done on them and any repairs and checkups. Same line item is like the security and safety. All the security and safety we've been doing, we now are increasing our PM program to make sure we're going to protect those things and keep on top of them.
Any other questions? Mr. Mottola, you had something, I know. Is it relevant to this? I just want to make sure if there's anybody.
No, it was a special ed question.
Okay, I'm going to go to Mr. DeWitt on this topic.
Yep.
And then, do you have something, Ms. Marmy? Okay.
So I have your list. Thank you very much. I got it
come
in
back to you.
email. The yellow is what's included in the budget, is that correct? And everything that's non-recurring, we've already had that briefing before the budget started. So that 2.781, that's a done deal. I think we approved that, correct?
With the exception of one project. That was the Stratfield roof project that got rejected by the Board of Selectmen.
Right. I mean, we
Yes.
we pushed forward what we were given, which was that. Right. That's a good point. Right. Okay. Okay. So all of the things in yellow will be funded if everything goes as you think, and everything that's not in yellow will be a number one next year, and then some of the number twos will turn into number ones, right? In theory.
And there'll be new items.
Right. And what's the criteria for priority one? Is it, I know Mr. Flynn said critical within 12 months, but I don't know if is that the real criteria for priority one?
There's a lot of things we use. Certainly, we listen to the principals of the school, teacher requests if they're related to indoor air quality issues, tools for schools issues. So we really look at quite a big gamut of items, prioritizing it as a one. You just don't call in and say, I want my room painted, and we go, okay, put that as a one.
Yeah.
We have to look at all the painting for the schools, where we're behind. Our painting budget is enough to try and touch 8 schools a year. We don't get to do all 17, but, so we
Right.
have running lists of what we need to do. But generally, we look at principal requests, teacher requests, what maintenance is picking up on, what the PM program reports are telling us, and then we identify them and sit as a group and say,
Right.
how critical is this? Is it really falling apart? Are people tripping and falling? Is it leaking? Things like that.
Right. And then my last comment, I want to agree with my colleagues in one point and disagree in another. I don't remember ever hearing there's a list of delayed maintenance projects. I'm there. But I will say, every time the town side comes to the Board of Ed and says, we need some cash, or we need you to reduce your budget, there's always something coming out of maintenance. And I think without fail, I always ask, how is this going to affect your maintenance budget? Now, a lot of times, like you said, last year, it was a reduction item. It ended up being realized, which was good news. But, we never had a list, I guess, is the point. But it does always seem to be on the chopping block as a vulnerable item, I guess, right?
That is true, and having been in the audience for many years and listening to this board, I know you've always questioned maintenance. And we've seen just the cost that comes with not necessarily moving forward on some projects. If you look at the list of unexpected maintenance expenses. Some of these were the Dwight bathrooms. I think 10 years ago, the Dwight bathrooms were up before our town bodies to be renovated, and they weren't. Now, we're fixing pipes and taking out tile that maybe we would not have had to do that if those bathrooms had been replaced 10 years ago. Now, I understand the decisions made then, but part of building the budget, I think the board gave staff clear direction that we wanted to be transparent and open about the real need of some of the projects in our 17 school buildings, many of which are, 50 years old. As Mr. Collins said, you have a list this year. There might be new items that are number one on the list next year. The board gave direction to staff to really look at HVAC, not to put off, even if they're functioning now, not necessarily to put off repairs or replacement on those. Just seeing what happened in Westport with having to close an elementary school due to mold. We had a lot of challenges at the beginning of the school year due to heat and humidity. That comes with a lot of the issues on this unexpected maintenance cost came due to the heat and humidity in the schools, and we're hoping that maybe by putting the investment now into some of these HVAC systems, we'll be in better shape moving forward and not have some unexpected expenses next year. And just so you know, so we're all on the same page in terms of what the need is within the district.
All right. I'm going to go to Mr. Walsh, and then I'll go, you're on this topic, correct, Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
And then we'll go back to Mr. Marmon.
Just one point in regards to delaying maintenance and stuff, Ms. Vitale, which you were just talking about. I don't think we have to look toward Westport because we had a school torn down for mold ourselves, so I don't have to look to Westport. I mean, I was on this board when we had to build a brand-new school for almost $27 million over mold. So, and I think that's one of the fears of this board is we don't want that to ever happen again. And it's our fear of you guys putting off maintenance. You guys have, from our point, at least my point, I'll speak for myself, you guys treat maintenance kind of the way the town, on the town side, treats paving. It's kind of like this holdover account, and we'll wait till the end of the year, see how our special education numbers are going, see how everything else is going, and if we have the money, we'll do it. And if we don't, we don't, which is kind of a scary thing when we've watched McKinley get torn down. Because they had a roof that was approved 3 times in 3 different budgets that was never put on, that caused a leaking into that building, that caused mold, that cost the town $27 million. So I think when we ask about maintenance, it is a fear of this committee that the maintenance is not going to get done. But, you know, I don't know if there's a better way. I'm not involved in your finances. You guys are. But to put together, but to hold out to not do maintenance issues is something that terrorizes this board, because we can't take $27 million hits. It just doesn't work anymore. So I think that's why we ask a lot of questions about it, and we're worried that the maintenance is not getting done. And I kind of agree with Mr. DeWitt. I don't remember hearing that there was stuff not really getting done. I mean, Tom, I mean, you, this is before Dr. Jones was here. There were a number of years with Dr. Jones' predecessor where on the non-recurring budgets, you guys were coming in with, I think, under $1 million of requests. I mean, when you could have probably, town would, we probably would have paid $2 million, but we were hearing that there were really no projects to be done.
I probably would say there might be 1 year we were under 1 million.
There was a couple of years where it was low. It was less than, you know, we were normally funding for a while the same amount on the town side and the Board of Education side. And I was shocked that you weren't trying to use that money for some project. And I'm not sure what the goal of that was, or whether you really did not have a project to be done.
You know, our goal has always been to be around 2 million for non-recurring, and then we also look at the capital requests, the larger projects, and we work with the town CFO and our bonding capability and be fiscally responsible for each year so that they kind of equal out.
Do you remember what the reason was for that? I mean, I can't even remember, but I remember we were surprised by it, that you wouldn't ask for at least the $2 million. Because it seemed to be like a whole $1 million was sitting there.
Yeah, I don't remember that
and
year.
that
I'd
you
have
guys
to-
just did not have a project for $1 million or multiple projects that would have added up to $1 million, whatever. But it's, you know, it's, I want to know that maintenance is getting done. I don't want to hear, I mean, unless you guys are really red flagging it at quarterlies, that things are not being done, and that it really gets on our radar.
Nope, anything that's in the non-recurring budget, capital requests, or in the operating budget is getting done. We make sure of that. We're not looking at these 12, 13 projects, and then at the end of the year, 3 or 4 aren't getting done.
Well, the non-recurring is getting
No.
done, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, but the ones that are in the budget are the
Operating
ones that are,
budget too.
they're all getting done?
Yes.
Okay. So for the last
Yes.
number of years, every single project was
Yep.
done? That was
Yes.
supposed to be done? Okay. And there's still delayed maintenance? Is that stuff you're just
Well,
not putting in the budget?
I think delayed maintenance, we mean that when we have a list of 1.6 million in priority ones, and we're getting, you know, 400,000 or 500,000 in the operating budget, that those are getting delayed.
Okay. Was that handed out tonight, that list?
Yeah, we've given this to Board of Finance.
This was
previously
emailed
too.
at the end
Emailed
of
a
last
couple
week.
Oh,
days
the
ago.
email from last, okay.
It came from the town office to you,
Okay.
to the Board of Finance.
And it's self-imposed delay. It's not a delay that this board or other town bodies, it's self-imposed when you have a list of, you know, multi-million dollars and trying to balance the needs of the town and the needs of the school district. And unlike the town that maybe can delay maintenance, we have children that have to come first in terms of making sure the programming and there's teachers and, you know, security and all those other things that really drive a school district. And why you're seeing a bigger increase this year is that we appreciate that, as I said, we need to be forthcoming on what the real maintenance needs are in the district.
Mrs. Marmee?
And I really appreciate that, because I think we need to kind of see what's going on, how you're making the decisions, and because I don't think we were as aware, perhaps, as we should be from an item-by-item list in terms of what you were, in fact, delaying. So I think that transparency is really important. I would just add that, you know, I'm struck by what you said about the Dwight bathrooms. Probably had we approved them, I don't know, was it 8 years ago, 10 years ago?
9.
9 years ago, and I remember that discussion. For me, it's really, it's not just that, you know, it's for the kids and they need, you know, I think it was ADA compliant bathrooms and it was maintenance, it was a lot of things. But I look at the cost, like if you delay this now, it's going to bite you in the butt, you know, 9 years from now from an increased cost. So for me, I think one of the criteria should be, what is the cost benefit of doing it now versus delaying it? Because I think that really speaks volumes in terms of, that should be a criteria. If we delay this maintenance now, we're going to pay in spades, you know, years later. So that, in my mind, should be a criteria, what the delayed maintenance means in terms of output.
Well, the one thing I'll say to that, though, and a follow-up is maybe, maybe not, right? I mean, because something was delayed 8 or 9 years ago doesn't necessarily mean that if it was a priority, it shouldn't have been brought up a number of other times and addressed before it got 8 to 9 years out. If it was identified 9 years ago as a need, and then it was just delayed at that point and then not brought before for approval again, you know, that's...
But it may or may not. I'm not saying that it will be an increased cost, but if you can identify it as perhaps an increased cost down the pike, I think that might be a criteria for delaying or not delaying that project. That's all I'm saying.
And my only point being that if it was a priority to be done 9 years ago because the town bodies at that time said there was a whole mess of things that needed to be done and that was one that fell off the list, that doesn't necessarily mean that shouldn't have been on the list a year later, or 2 years later, or 3 years later. We've had 9 years to put it back on the list, unless we've rejected it multiple
We
times.
have twice.
Which maybe
I was
twice
gonna
in 9
say.
years. Merry Christmas.
Twice, and then we looked at it with the previous superintendent, and we discussed maybe moving it into the Dwight renovation project that was on the waterfall, but then that got pushed out 3
Right.
times, and hence where we are today.
But it wasn't a conscious decision to delay it for 9 years.
Correct.
Right. Okay, thank you. Good discussion. Other points on the superintendent's presentation, Mr. DeWitt?
Yeah, just one more on this. So I was having a discussion with someone, I can't remember who it was. You know, maybe a waterfall on maintenance. I know it might sound a little extreme, but the waterfall for me, for the town, we see everything in this year, in the next 3-4 years, and then when something comes off and gets moved, I mean,
We
there's
see that on the Board of Ed side, too, for the major maintenance.
Major
I mean,
stuff.
for the major.
but not in the
stuff.
waterfall.
Your question kind of, what you just said relates to this. Have we ever gotten a list like this before?
Yes.
We have.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But I'm saying, this, Ms. Marmion's statements, all of our statements is, we're talking about X number of projects this year, and some move into the next year. If this were our waterfall, and we were going to take a fire truck and move it to the next year, we literally see it move over. It might be a way to present this. I mean, there's numbers on here, there's big numbers, and some of this non-recurring stuff. And then you could deal with the financing and all. Like, so I don't know if that's a better way to do it or not. It might be one way to display it and how this might be ever shifting or not, right? Just a recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Mr. Mottola, you were
did have
after
one
Ms.
thing,
Marmion, and then I'll go to Mr. Walsh.
So on your presentation on the special ed slide where you showed savings of over $1 million, you referenced 25 students. Was that over just a one-year period? It is, okay.
I'm sorry, I can't hear that.
Didn't you say that's likely to rise as well, up to 50, or is that? did you
Well,
say
what we
something
try
like
to
that?
give you is kind of an estimated actual. Really, we're in the middle of the year, so it changes. But what you're seeing is that we know in our impact program, which is what we talked about last year during this budget cycle, that it took $539,000 to fund the staff for that program. And what you see underneath there is that if the program has 25 students that they're servicing, that we don't have to outplace. That's what that savings is, and you're seeing that at $1 million on the bottom right.
Yep.
And really, in that program right now, we have 50 students, and even when we calculated this, we calculated at $65,000 per student, and the average is generally much higher than that. So we tried to be conservative in that we know the program is working, it's being cost-effective, and we're providing a great service for our students.
Thanks.
All right, we'll go to Mr. Walsh.
Just back to maintenance for a second. Are you going to be adding a certain amount? Are we supposed to see this number stay the same, this maintenance number, for the foreseeable future, or this increase? Or, I mean, is there a commitment to get this stuff done over a certain period of time?
We're going to keep on putting it in there and, work with town bodies to, get it funded. Now that you have this list, I think you'll be seeing it, Dr. Jones and I talked about it, just even the unexpected maintenance projects come up, to report those to town bodies, just so you have an idea of the challenges that we're facing throughout the year.
But under maintenance projects, it's went up $90,000. Is that what you're seeing as the new normal?
Sorry, I don't know where he's looking.
That was just the project, the maintenance project line item. So last year it was 376,000, this year it's 474.
Yeah, so are you going to be seeing that as a new normal, or are you going to be ramping that up? What is the plan? I mean, I presume there's a plan to get the $1.6 million worth of stuff done, right?
Yes. There's a plan to continue with the priority list, add in the new items, continually look at the 2s and 3s. They generally, occasionally get worse and have to get moved up. So there is a plan to continue to work with those priorities and put in the maximum amount we think can get funded through all the town bodies,
So you're not seeking what you think needs to be done or on some specific plan of working through the things around the 1.6. You're kind of a catch as catch go. So you're going to look at your entire budget, and if you have stresses in your budget in a given year, insurance goes up, we're going to be seeing less maintenance projects getting done. If
it's
you have a
possible.
better year and insurance happens to go down or some other things happen to go down, you're going to be seeing more things get done.
We generally, I'm here 17 years, the maintenance projects have run 375,000 to 815,000. That's the range that we've had in our operating budgets.
It seems to me there should be a more definitive kind of number that you're going to start throwing at this to kind of work through some of these issues, as opposed to, you know, this is a good year in certain ways, and because it appears as though maintenance is kind of, like I said, kind of a gap number at the end when you figure out what you can really do.
Well, I want you to know we do meet internally and talk about all of the cuts that are made. You know, and they'll ask about certain projects, and I give them the feedback that, no, we can't touch this one. It's a serious issue at this specific school, so we have a discussion about all of them. We try and keep them in as many as we can, if not all of them.
Sure. Ms. Marmon?
So it's interesting because the first selectman cut the Board of Ed budget by $700,000, correct? So this, potentially some of these items of deferred maintenance will be, I don't know. I mean, I know it's the board decision, obviously, in terms of where you're going to find, where you're going to cut, basically. So I know the priority, obviously, is programs for students and certain fixed costs you can't touch. So maintenance, I'm assuming you're going to be looking at these priorities on your list and making those tough decisions, correct?
We look at all our accounts in maintenance, so technical consulting, maintenance material supplies, custodial supplies, we look at everything along with the maintenance projects.
And the board will be, when we're faced with that reduction, we'll have to look at the full budget. We'll ask staff for their recommendations, where they would suggest making the $700,000 reduction, and it'll be up to the board to discuss.
Mr. Mottola? And then come back.
So kind of relating to what Mr. Walsh was talking about, I would imagine that every year you have to look to see, you know, what you have to do with maintenance and kind of take the temperature of what's going on that particular year and come up with a number. And that number obviously can vary to a certain degree every year. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. You know, I think, maybe, I don't know if you're saying this, Mr. Walsh, should there be a set number every year that we just put in there, like $1 million a year and just
Yeah, I don't.
your thought process is?
Yeah, I'm kind of thinks if we're behind on stuff,
Yeah.
I would expect to see some type of plan where we're going to start bumping it up by a certain amount of money per year, and we would.
Sure. I understand what you're saying.
That would be explained, and we would expect to see that number kind of on a yearly basis as
Yeah.
part of their budget. It's kind of like, John, you've been through these discussions
Sure.
here at this board where we talk about, on the town side, it's similar to paving, once again.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, we should be doing 13.5 miles of paving per year, and that equals this amount. And then all of a sudden we get a budget, and paving's way down. Well, why is it way down? Oh, we don't need it. Well, okay, then we don't need it, and Scotty explains why we don't need it. And then we get a surplus, and all of a sudden we're starting to be explained by the administration, oh, can you throw some of that surplus at paving? Well, I thought we didn't need it. You know, we should have a plan, and we should try, I think, and try to stick to it. If we're behind on maintenance, we should try to catch up. And I'm not saying catch up in any given year. I'm just trying to say, and Ms. Vitale, I give you credit to say that, you know, things need to get done. And they need to be put in budgets. But there should be, okay, we're behind some of these projects. Maybe we should make a formal commitment that we're going to start putting a little bit more money towards that. I'm not saying do it over 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. I don't know what it is. It's not my plan. But I would think that if we're behind on things, the town's buildings, I think that we need to know that they're being maintained and that we're catching up at least on it. We're not falling further behind just because it's a tough budget year.
Mr. DeWitt, did you have something on this topic?
Yeah, it's a follow-up to Mr. Walsh's question, because I thought where he was going, what's the number this year, 474? Is that right?
Yeah, and change.
Right. Is that the bare minimum, keeping four walls, making sure everything's okay, and the 1.6 is we're getting ahead of it? That's kind of thought where Mr. Walsh was going. Because, I mean, it's $1.2 million between those two numbers, right? I feel like the 474 is just sneaking by, everything, nobody's going to get hurt, everything's fine. But the 1.6 is, I'd be chipping away at this a little more, right? Or maybe 600,000, I don't know what the number is, right? But I think I'm aligning with Mr. Mottola and Mr. Walsh that the bare minimum it maybe isn't working for us, and there's, just like we did with the golf course, right? We said over a 10-year period, we give them much less money than this, of course. But, you know, you replace all the sand traps over a 10-year period, or whatever it is. Kind of the same thing. We need to maybe have more of a fixed number. I hate to say a fixed number, but more of a fixed number to help us chip away at this problem.
Mr. Cullen, I would think that's exactly what you do, right? I mean, you have a staff, you know, I'm looking on page 167, you have the list of schools, the square footage. I mean, when you put this together, are you thinking, this is what I need, or this is what I think will get passed?
We're really looking at both. You know,
So-
like, I start out with the list at 1.6, and I bring it to the superintendent, and we sit and talk about every single one on that list.
I'm sorry, 1.6, did you say?
Right.
So it went from 1.6 to 470?
No, it goes from 1.6 to like 800,000. We'll meet again, and it gets down to 700, and then 500, and as we're looking at the budget and pecking away at it and what we have to do and talking with the principals, of what's in there and what's critical. And then we find a happy medium number that we think we fiscally responsible and keep up with as much maintenance as we can, and based on what we're going to get for non-recurring for the larger ones.
Right, I would think that's a practice that happens everywhere. It happens where we work, you do the best you can with the money that you have, and there's certain priorities, and, you know, some things get cut as long as you're not cutting safety, and you think you can
Right.
get through to the next year. I mean, it's up to you to tell us if this is workable for you for this next coming budget. Are you saying that it is?
It is for all the planned work. So the unexpected things we deal with on a day-to-day basis.
See, I'm closer to where Mr. Brown is on this, and it's unfortunate, Mr. Cullen, that you're leaving in April and that the superintendent's leaving in June there, because this will be for the next group to work with you guys on. But here's what I'm getting lost in this whole thing, right? For a number of years, actually, so I've been here 14 years. Mr. Cullen, you've been here 15 years? maybe?
17.
17, okay. By the time I got here, you were big into, and for those first few years, we were doing all the roof projects and everything, and you were big into the preventative maintenance programs. And it was every year you'd come before us, and I got another preventative maintenance program on this, and another, and I give you credit. I'm not making fun of you. I'm kind of making fun of you, but I'm giving you credit for it, because you put us on these programs that helped us maintain these things, right? Then you come to Mr. Brown's point that every year, you know, you have so much square footage, you're going to need this number of dollars to general maintenance of those square footages. So I'm sitting here, when I hear we're falling behind, I'm sitting here saying, geez, we're paying for all these preventative maintenance programs. We're putting money away every year to do the general maintenance things. We've got $2 million a year in the non-recurring. We've got these large school projects that we're doing. There seems that there'd be, and this isn't a judgment, I'm just saying my thought process is that there's a lot of money there to be spent on these projects. And then to hear that, oh no, we're not keeping up on things, we're delaying things in this, that's just a surprise, given all the money we're spending on preventative maintenance, all the money we're spending on an annual basis, all the money we put into non-recurring, and all the money that we've done on these capital projects. So I think, you know, to the point of what's going into that bucket that's fallen through here is really the question that I would have, that says, oh my God, we've got $1.6 million worth of projects here and we're only asking for $400,000 to $500,000. How did that bucket get so big when we're spending all the money on all these other projects, particularly if they're, you know, critical path items? That's what's confusing me.
I think it's, and being a realist, I mean, we know what happened with the economy 2009, 2010, but that's one of the reasons we included the chart that we did to look at school funding over time. And I think what you're seeing is that when you have a school district that has salaries, has the utilities, has all of those pressures, our primary, the primary piece of our budget is people. We have to have the people. When you try to run at 2.9%, some years 1.5, that means the next year, school districts are playing catch-up, which I suppose the town would be as well. But when you do that over time, it does make it more difficult, because something has to come out of the budget. And our safety, we were just talking about special education, our safety issues in special education, when I sit down with Mr. Mancusi, are just as important as any issues that are in this maintenance budget. And you don't have preventative maintenance for the carpet that ripped, and you've got little kids that have to sit on it, and somebody got sick, and I'm sorry to say this, but threw up on it, or, there are things that happen, and that has to go into the ongoing maintenance. But you can't have preventative maintenance for things like that that happen. And we still have put some things off, and then we come back the following year and try to get them back in because they need to be done. It's just the hard decision-making we have to make to bring a respectful budget to the town.
Any other comments? We've beat this kind of one around a lot. Next, we're still in the superintendent's presentation. What else do we want to go to? Any other? I have my own thoughts, questions, follow-up items. Mr. Walsh?
Dr. Jones, thank you for the presentation. I do find it a little offensive, the whole demographics and talking about teachers and how many live here and how many spend here. It's not really helpful to the process. This is not supposed to be a marketing, or I'd expect this from maybe our economic development chief when we're moving a company in. It's not something I expect from teachers that we give jobs to, administrators that we give jobs to. We all live here in Fairfield, and we're part of the community. We're 60,000 strong. We all pay taxes. Everybody up at this table pays taxes. We have employees. Well, Mr. Mayor doesn't live in Fairfield, but Ms. Gardner does. But we all live here.
Pay taxes.
Oh yeah, that's right. Actually, you do pay. You don't live here, but you own a house here, and you pay a lot of taxes.
That's why I own the house. It's
I know.
taxes.
And we appreciate
But
it,
it's just, I don't think it's really pertinent to the conversation. I mean, we all, live here. I live here. I have a business here. I employ people here. They all buy stuff here and use our delis and all that stuff. But it's just like nobody seems to want really credit for any of that. We all know, and we all purchase stuff wherever we are. This is not Amazon, and Amazon coming in, and this is how many people they're going to bring in, and this is how much they're going to spend on dry cleaning and food and all this other stuff. That part of the presentation started sounding like you were talking. I'm hearing Mr. Smoller. That's who I'm hearing. Okay, so I'm just saying I just don't think it's pertinent.
And in all due respect, Mr. Wall, I respect that, but
Yep.
I do think it's important. And, in my previous district, we hired an economist so we could better understand that how can we get our staff to live in the district, because when you have that component and you have 53% of your staff that are living in the district, they are putting dollars back into Fairfield. And our district does not look like a lot of the other districts up and down Fairfield County. And I do think it's important for people to know, and most people are surprised when they hear that it's 53%. And they're also surprised that they're around the other localities, because we tend to think we have a lot of commuters. So again, I'm just being respectful. I think from the economy standpoint, school districts are large drivers in any town, and I think that's a good statistic to know. That what we're paying our teachers and our administrators, and we're grateful for it, that a lot of those dollars do go back in and are infused into the town, where in a lot of places they're not.
Well, I guess I'd like to hear a little gratefulness for paying their salaries to do that. So, but I'm not asking for it, actually. So it's just, we could look at it both ways.
Sure. I thought you of all people that would actually appreciate it. So I really, in all sincerity, I'm surprised.
It just starts sounding more, I'm here to hear about
Yeah.
the education costs and the budget and what programs you have and what programs you're making better and how everything's, maintenance and all this stuff. I'm not here to hear about demographics of teachers and how much they're bringing to our community. It's just, it's, I don't know. I found that part a little bit insulting, but that's all right.
All right. I've got a few myself, so I'll go to Mrs. Esma
Yeah,
first.
just to follow up to Mr. Walsh's, I think I saw this very differently, and that is to maybe segue at some point in this discussion into salaries, that we want to be assured that we are paying a fair salary to our teachers. We have competitors around us. That's what other districts are. How many live here is maybe an indication of where we are on that scale. And so I didn't see it as we're promoting the kind of economic activity they bring, but trying to figure out where we sit in the, in terms of salary for surrounding districts or any place where our teachers would be able to go, or are they, not making enough to actually live and be part of the community? So I heard that presentation piece a little bit differently.
Thank you.
I think
I'm curious what Ms. Esma means. There's a 2.7% increase in salaries. I think that's what the number was. You don't think any of that 2.7% increase in salaries would have been better off going to maintenance or to curriculum?
Well, you have to look at the drivers. It's not just increases in salary, it's fewer retirements than expected. It's having to maintain classroom size. I mean, there are multiple drivers in that number.
I mean, classroom guidelines, the laws, guidelines that we've self-imposed on ourselves, right? So
Okay,
you're
that's
fine with
responding to the
You're fine with a
district.
2.7 increase that next year is going to 3.5? Because that's just, if a number's fixed and that percentage gets higher, it's got to come out of somewhere, right? Mr. Cullen won't be here, but it'll come out of maintenance and it'll come out of services. Or
Well, that's-
curriculum, right?
it's the same.
Or we just keep pushing 5-6% increases every year.
Well, again, those increases are driven every year by a different set of variables. I'm not endorsing anything, I'd like to hear more about that. But it's like,
The next 3 years, the biggest drivers, unless I'm wrong, please tell me I am, will be the salaries. It's more than half of the driver this year.
right, which is a function of the number of teachers.
In the fact that the contract settlement, right?
But just on that, and I have some issues with that, and we're going to talk about that, but the thing about the salary increases is there's, over the next 3 years, I'm looking at this. This year, there's a 1.55% increase, correct? And then you have, for next year, 2.92% increase, and then next year, you're right, it's 3.52. And that's a big jump, but if you average that out, you're talking about a 2.6 over the 3 years. This is the way this contract was negotiated, right? So, I mean, if you average it out, it's about a 2.5, a little more than 2.5% increase over a 3-year period.
No, it's 2.5% each year, is what you're saying.
year.
The average increase is
Average.
2.5, not 2.5 over 3 years. Right. Yeah.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
2.5.
Yeah, no, I
each
understand.
year.
I just thought you said it the wrong way, but you're right.
I mean, just Ms. Matola, the 2.7 I'm referring to is on
No, I
that
hear
slide
you.
from the presentation. That's what
And I think that's attributed to, and maybe we should get into it now, and I'll defer to Mr. Flynn whether we want to start getting into that.
Let's get into the more specifics. We actually went into a little bit more specifics than I intended on the maintenance,
Sure.
because we
Sorry
have the
about
other
that.
slide to go through. No, that's quite all right. It was a great discussion. But is there anything specific, comments? I've got some follow-up comments on the presentation itself that I'd like to see. Some pages of the presentation were actually in our budget book, so I'm going to refer to the front of the budget book. So thank you for that. I'm going to go to page 2, which is the ever referred to per pupil expenditures in this book. There's a key piece of information that's missing, I always think, in this presentation on this page. I'm going to ask Mrs. Manzel if we could follow up and get the number of students in each of the districts and add that to the presentation. Because there's two percentages here, right? There's two drivers of this. It's total dollar value that these communities spend on their budget, and then the number of students. And the fact is, on this presentation, particularly as it relates to the communities on the right-hand side, which are the ones with the higher per pupil expenditure, with the probable exception of Stanford, and I'm not sure where Greenwich plays out.
It's all the way to the right.
No. I'd like to know the number of students in those versus our 9,600 and some odd, because that 9,600 and some odd is a key determinant, because we have all sorts of one-time costs, such as the administration and such as all these one-time costs that get spread over 9,600 students versus over a smaller number here. So I think that's a key statistics that's missing from this page. The second one, and it goes to somewhat of the conversation, it was very interesting, and I don't have this answer right now. Mr. Mayor, I'm wondering if you could help us. This would be page 3, which is not part of the presentation, but Mr. Mottola referred to it, and that is the percentage increases for all the employees. This was a great page, so thank you very much for putting this together. This is very helpful. And it shows over the last number of years, I think this goes back, it's 2015 and goes through 2020, 2021. It shows the percentage increases, the contractual percentage increases in all the different bargaining units. Mr. Mayor, do we have a statistic on what in the private sector the increases in earnings are over this same period of time? Because that'd be an interesting stat, because what we're trying to do is figure out, when we look at these things, we have to look at, some people like to call it the ability to pay, some people just, look, it's our taxpayers that are paying the bills. So it'd be interesting to know what the growth in the private sector was during that same period of time.
Yeah, I could, I mean, I have a number in my head, but I'm not positive the exact right number, so I can certainly get something to you, though.
Yeah, over the same period of time, if we
Yeah.
could, and if we looked
Yeah.
in the state of Connecticut.
Yeah, no, I
what's
have that,
happening.
I have that data.
Yeah, that'd be great. On page 4, this I thought was a very good page as well. These were the areas of consolidation with town departments, and I just, if I might, I just want a couple of clarifications here. It says the town purchasing department oversees school-specific bids. I know that to be true. And then it says that the purchasing director approves all requisitions. What staffing is in your office for purchasing?
Mine?
Yeah, or in the school, in the central administration. How do you guys work that?
As far as approval,
No, as far as, do you have somebody that works solely on purchasing for you guys?
She doesn't work solely on purchasing, but she does, she previews requisitions before I do to make sure that they adhere to all the purchasing guidelines. And she does a lot of, bulk purchasing type of research and that kind of stuff. But
And does she work closely with the purchasing department on the town side? Is that what happens? Or does she essentially do that on its own, but then she prepares some of the RFPs, they come to you, and then you pass them on to the purchasing director?
RFPs would be prepared by, the department that has the need. She's not necessarily that
Yeah.
involved in that.
Do all those RFPs and all that work go through the town purchasing department?
Yes.
Okay, so those are all handed over to your side. I'm just trying to get a clearer way of how that works. Why don't you just leave it on, Bob?
Yeah. No, well, the ones I get involved with, like the school district and all that, it's a combination. The Board of Ed drafts something up, and the purchasing department, finalizes it, and puts it together, and manages the process.
Yeah, I'm just trying
Then
to
we
figure
get
out if we're
involved in
being
the-
efficient in using,
Yeah.
because the way this read almost made it sound as though there was no purchasing function at all whatsoever on the Board of Ed side, and that it was all on the town side, and I didn't see
The
that.
town side writes all the POs, though, I think, right? Purchase orders?
The purchasing director approves them, but we do our own. We print them out, we send them, we process them, that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Right.
Every department does their own POs.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So does the Board of Ed operate any differently than any other department when it comes to purchasing? Some way, shape, or form, right?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's
Can we
pretty
just,
consistent.
I'd just like a clarification. That doesn't need to be during the budget process. I just didn't get that. The other item is, it said Fairfield Public School handles accounts payable for the town. Is that all the invoices for the town are now handled by the AP department at the?
No, they handle theirs, the town handles theirs.
Okay, so this says FPS handles accounts payable from the town and added this work with no additional staff. I don't understand what that means. That was news to me. Sounds like it's news to you.
No, there was a time when they were all paid on the town side, got split maybe 4 years ago.
So now, the Board of Ed, you pay your own invoices, you have your own accounts payable function.
Correct.
Okay, but you're not paying the town side invoices,
No.
you're just paying. Okay, so that reads wrong. Okay, that's fine, it was just, or maybe I read it wrong is a better way to say it.
No, it's not.
Can we go to page 7? ECC enrollment growth, I know we'll probably talk about this later. I just was very curious as to what accounts for that growth. Forgive me for not, I know you guys have spent a lot of time on ECC and all that, so we went from 75 to 186. Is that mandate changes? Is that advertising? Is that, what is going on there?
We have a legal process called Child Find where, those children who are at that pre-K age, we're obligated to test and assess those children to see if they need services. And there are just more children in our town qualifying for services.
Have the standards changed? Has this, you know what I'm saying? What's driving such a huge increase in 10 years? Hello.
Hello, Rob Mancusi, Director of Special Education. Good evening. I will say this is a conversation that we have among directors in Fairfield County as well as along the state. The numbers of preschool students being identified in need of services has skyrocketed across the state. We believe largely that has to do over time with child find activities that we have to make parents aware of, pediatricians aware of, area preschools aware of who we are, what we do, what our goal is in terms of meeting the needs of students with disabilities. So we're getting a lot more referrals because I think people's awareness has increased as well as the quality of evaluations.
So help me, the quality of the evaluation, does that mean the evaluation measurements have changed, or are we still?
I don't think the evaluation measurements have changed. It's just the comprehensiveness of the evaluations have changed because we are challenged if we don't do comprehensive evaluations.
Challenge meaning what? I'm sorry, Mr. Mancusi. I'm trying to.
We're challenged in terms of student eligibility by our parents or our parent attorneys or our parent advocates.
Right, so there's a move afoot out there to get children identified at a younger age and get them services at a younger age.
Our awareness of the importance of early intervention continues to increase. This is not a trend that is Fairfield specific. I think it is everywhere you go.
And are we seeing savings as the kids get older in not needing as many services because we've identified them earlier?
I think by identifying students earlier, you do realize savings, and if you service students earlier, it increases your likelihood of being able to maintain student programming in district versus sending students with significant disabilities out to outplacements, which can cost easily $100,000 or $200,000, depending on the severity of the disability.
Any other questions on this point, Mr. DeWitt?
What? Are we going to dig into ECC now? Because I was ready to allocate an hour of my life to this tonight.
No, I mean, let's stay high level on this.
Okay.
But just,
Okay, then I'll defer to that conversation later.
Mr. Mancusi, thanks for coming this evening. In regard to your statements about that it's, you've been finding more of this in Fairfield County and then across the state. Is it based on our state laws in regards to this, or are these national laws that apply?
These are federal
Okay.
child find obligations.
So this then is this a national trend then? Because it seemed like if it's the same laws, it should be a national trend, no matter where you are, if there's more recognition of this, of the issues and better testing, correct?
I have not looked at national data recently, but I can venture to say we are all more aware than we were 15, 20 years ago of the importance of our child find obligations and our child find activities and our outreach to communities in terms of finding and identifying and programming for students with disabilities at an earlier age. And I think the Birth to 3 system also has improved it's identification of students with disabilities. So, birth to 3, once they identify, they'll refer the kids to us. So more kids are being referred through birth to 3 as well.
So that would be kind of national anyway, too, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And the evaluation process you mentioned is getting better, so that's finding more students, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Ms. Marvin?
I just want to follow up. I think it's not just within the school systems, but if you look across the board, I mean, I'll give an example at our pediatrician's office. They now screen at your annual medical exam for anxiety and depression. This is in the last 2 years. And then I recently noticed that they now have a social worker on staff at the pediatrician's office to assist parents with those kids who have been identified as having perhaps some mental health issues. It goes beyond the school system. I think it's the awareness that's driving the screening, the identification, and then hopefully addressing those issues before they become very severe. So I see kind of a 360-degree awareness and treatment approach.
You're absolutely correct. We get a lot of referrals from parents through their pediatricians, and we collaborate with pediatricians in terms of student presentations and areas of concern that need to be evaluated.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
Maybe leading to a different subject, but the trend, and I don't know if it's for Connecticut or if it's federal, it's just for universal preschool, right? It seems to me that we're heading in that direction. It's in your book on page 9. So is this state pushing this?
No.
Universal preschool?
Yes.
Or is it a federal mandate or a state mandate, or where are we with that?
What you're referencing is the legislation to watch, impact of recent mandates. So they've had it the last biennium, and then they have it again at the state level where there's been discussion of universal pre-K in Connecticut. Do we think it will go anywhere soon? I think with all of the other budget challenges, I don't see it, but there are states in the United States that have instituted universal pre-K. Universal pre-K means any child. There, still going to have child find, which is exactly what we have. Then it would be all children who are, 3 and 4 years old to be able to access preschool through public school. Connecticut is talking about it, and I think there are people who would like to go in that direction, but financially, right now, I think it's been constrained.
So when do we start thinking about what that cost is for that and start to prepare ourselves for something?
We calculated it for you actually in this paragraph where it just, and again, this is a very
Classroom.
very simplistic calculation, but
But there's no dollar amount.
yeah, 7 million.
Where's the 7 million?
It's in paragraph 2 on page 8. If Fairfield budgeted 6 million in 1920, but actual cost rose to 7 million. It's just it's giving you an idea of if you had X amount of students that could qualify for pre-K based on the students, in Fairfield that are likely the number of students and what it would cost.
I was reading that differently.
But again, it's very much an estimate. It's not a number that.
No, that's special ed.
I thought that was the special.
Oh, that's special ed. It's actually in the Q&A. I'm sorry.
That's what I was
Let me double
confused
check and see if it's down below. I know we have it in the Q&A. Down below, we have the universal pre-K, which is number 4. And
I didn't see the number.
yeah, and on average, our grade levels are 682 students for our 3 to 5-year-olds. So we would have to look at the tuition currently charged, as well as enrollment for as much as 400 more students.
It is.
Right.
So it'd be another 22 classrooms across the district.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
This is
we don't know the whole, in here, and maybe you reference a Q&A. In here, there's no, quite frankly, I don't see the estimate of the total.
Yeah, we can send you that. We had it on the Q&A for the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
It would be a lot.
Yeah, it's a big
Well,
number.
you'd lose the revenue, and then you'd have to.
Well, it's
have-
a school, like I think I heard you say, it's 22 classrooms.
Yeah.
Right, so,
Okay.
okay.
In the budget, in the ECC, you had you talked about total classrooms planned, and it says 2019, 2020, 10 split between ECC site and second location. So are we to assume that's what's in the budget? Is the assumption that there's 2 sites?
We have already been accessing Stratfield
Yeah.
this year, and next year that will continue, but we have additional pre-K sections. However, we took our general education pre-K, which had initially been put in for racial imbalance. We've absorbed those now for ECC, which saved the addition of adding 2 ECC classrooms next year. So we've moved that line item over to be ECC.
No, I understand. I'm
Programming.
saying, does the budget assume the 2 locations? Is that what
Yeah.
this is? Okay. All right, any other questions on this right now? Mary, please. Mrs. Leclerc.
Hi, I'm back to like the awareness issue, is because like 21 years ago when my son was, went through the ECC, I had absolutely no idea. I think the parents are much more aware. It was the preschool that told me, you need to bring your son there and have him tested and checked. I had no understanding of any of that. So I think now with the Facebook and internet and stuff, parents are so much more aware of issues with their child and what developmental stages they should be at. But what I was wondering is, can you put percentages on these, like for the ECC and for the special ed? You give us the number of students per year and show us the increase, but what percentage of students is that? So I guess what I'm saying is, like, for
Yeah.
special ed needs, like, I always thought we always were slightly below 10% were designated for special ed, and then the last couple of years, we've gone above that, and I guess that's the percentage. I'd like to see how that is changing.
The 165 students that you see here, we generally would love to have typical peers, which would be equal to the number of students that have disability. And right now, only 35 of those are typical peers, and of those 35, 14 of those are actually EL students. So there are very few that are English language learners.
So we keep talking about ECC.
Yes,
We keep having this conversation, but we're not talking about it yet.
Okay. thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Leclerc, anything else?
No.
All right. Pages 8 and 9. Any questions, comments? We just went through some of that. The one thing I think would be very helpful, this was great that we had this, so thank you for putting it together. It'd be great if you guys had estimates of what the dollar impact would be if these things went through, or ranges of estimates of what the dollar impact, because these could be substantial, and we should be monitoring these, and the whole town should be aware.
Well, to that point also, I just want to clarify, pre-K, there are some revenue drivers in that. I mean, you may have children that need mandated special services, which they're entitled to, but there is, as I understand, a sliding scale fee for preschool? And would that be the case even if it were universal pre-K were mandated?
Generally, when universal, it would all depend on what the state, how it's legislated. But from my experience in Oklahoma, where we went universal pre-K, no, it was fully funded by the state, and there was no tuition, and it was free and, free, appropriate public education.
But now we do have.
Right now, we do have
A sliding
tuition.
scale fee.
Okay.
Just a question on the
Go right
legislative
ahead.
issues. I think the legislative issues, at least for me, is what keeps me nervous, because do we know them all? You list 4, but are there others? And if there is, I mean, is there a way to inform us on what they may be and how they may affect us, even on a quarterly basis, so we can not be surprised on?
I was going to say that. Add it to our quarterly agenda, legislative update on our quarterly agenda from what you guys are seeing from your point would be very helpful to make sure that we're all on the same page. I
And
think
it's
that's-
something that we can address before, before it's too late even. If we want to make it, if we want to take a stand or get our elected officials involved up in Hartford, including regionalization. Because I'm hearing regionalization, I don't know where it's at or how serious it is or what it means for Fairfield, but it is something that I think that every town body in Fairfield should be aware of and know who to address if we need to basically make our case, whether we're for or against something.
Mr. Mottola? Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Can I have go ahead.
Can I just, this year, the Board of Education has a legislative liaison, Ms. Jacobson, who is in the audience, and she has been just updating the board on all proposed legislation. And there is a lot. This was formulated before all of those talks about regionalization and everything else that's going on at the state level. It changes like daily, so I don't even want to reference anything. We would be happy to copy you on our update, just so you have it, because we get it whenever something new is happening up there. Jen is very good about notifying the board. Happy to pass that along, and I'm sure our state legislators, have their own updates. But for education specific, we can add to
Yeah,
our
I think doing
distribution
the
list.
quarterly thing, I mean, we don't want to get into,
Well-
we're happy to get the distribution that you guys get. I think kind of at the quarterly meetings, if there's updates, that'd be very good for us to just know.
We would do that, but sometimes it might be too late.
Understood. Right.
That's all.
Right.
So
But
I
you never need to, if
So
if
we
that's
will-
the case, you don't need to wait, obviously.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just want to keep you in the loop.
No, thank you. Go ahead. Mr. Mottola, did you? Yeah.
Sure, just kind of curious, as Dr. Jones, as superintendent of schools on something like universal pre-K, I'm sure conceptually superintendents in Connecticut probably think that's an important thing. But how would the superintendents go about lobbying or dealing with the state? Would it be, it's a great idea, but the state needs to fully fund this? Would that be the take from superintendent's standpoint?
Yes, I mean, we would not want it to be an unfunded mandate. Absolutely.
Any other questions on 8 or 9? Thank you for that. I thought those pages were very good. I'm just going to flip to page 11, and this is the income side, and I actually don't think we've spent a lot of time on this in years past, so I just wanted to flip through that, and then I'm going to go right to the Wally Flynn schedule, which we've already dumped into, but page 11, the projected funding for fiscal year 19 is $1,091,000, an increase of 15 from the 18 allocation. What's in here now and what's it based on for fiscal year 20? Was that a wrong reference? Was that supposed to be for fiscal year 20? I'm just asking, I didn't know. If you look at the very top paragraph where it talks about educational cost sharing, it says the projected funding for fiscal year 19 is $1,091,000, an increase of 15% from the fiscal year 18 allocation. I'm just trying to get a sense for this, for the fiscal year we're talking about right now, where your estimate for ECS funding came from, just so that we know.
The $1,091,000 came from the state, and the town has received partial payment, and based on the percentage, there was 25% received in October. I haven't gotten an update if we've gotten anything in January, but.
Okay, I guess
seems-
thank you, Mrs. Mintz. I guess what I'm asking is this what the governor's budget includes? Is this remaining flat year over year?
Okay, for next year, the governor's budget is $1,101,506.
So it's actually, there's more coming in than what's in per the governor's budget, there's
Which-
more coming in.
Came out after this went.
Right, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure. So that does not tie to the governor's budget. There's a few $1,000s more based on his budget, correct?
Right, it's about 10,000, a little more than 10,000.
Okay. Now I'll open up Pandora's box. Further down on page 11, open choice. I haven't seen this in writing, but somebody told me the reimbursement amount might be changing. Is that true?
We were able to confirm through, or I was through Krista McCarthy-Vahey, who worked at the state level to help me get the answer. They are moving a line item out of open choice budget. Does not impact the $3,000 per student. It had to do with transportation. It's just how they're going to fund transportation. But it is not anticipated, if the budget goes through, to have an impact.
Okay. How many students are assumed in this budget? I read 100 somewhere? 100 open choice?
No, we currently started the year with 85, and that's what was put into this budget.
So you're at 8, so you assumed 85. You started this year at 85, and you're assuming that it remains flat next year.
Yes.
Is that the intention, or is that just a budgeting thing?
I always discuss it with the board in the spring. I don't know, but Ms. Vitale, if you want to add to that.
It was intentional for it to be 85 for budgeting, our racial imbalance plan has us going up to 100, and it will be a discussion in the spring, I think, as part of our budget discussions. I mean, it is an income driver that we do get money for these students. Any excess costs due to special education are billed back to Bridgeport now, so that is also income to the district. But for the sake of this budget, 85 is the number, and it'll
Okay.
be up for further discussion.
Yes, go right ahead.
What is the distribution of these students in elementary versus middle versus high school?
Do you have it in front of you? Sorry. I'm trying to.
The 85 students, I think there's 45 at the elementary school level. Right now, 22 at the high school, and the rest are at the middle school.
So is there a strategy in terms of the grade that we, or the school level that we accept these students? Or I know high school, it's more expensive to educate our high school students, but is the goal to get the students in young and go through our entire system, or is the goal to, from a cost perspective, and then just from an educational perspective, what is the strategy we use?
It was a little bit different strategy this year because last year, as you know, we took 0 students. And so in an effort to try to meet the letter of the racial imbalance plan, we wanted to take students this year, with the will of the board. So this year, we actually took some students in high school instead of in kindergarten so that they are in our system for a shorter amount of time. We knew that we had sections where we could place those students without having an impact on cost, because one of the challenges is always, certainly we would prefer to have them in kindergarten from day one and go all the way through our system, but then you have to look at that cohort growth over time as well and calculate that in. So that was just a different strategy this year in order to take open choice students so that when we're before the state board, we can tell them that we have done that. But it was different than we've done in the past.
Please.
So I know this is part of our racial imbalance plan. Are we actually addressing the need? I mean, are we meeting the need set by the state or closing that gap with this program? And to what degree are we closing that gap?
That's a good question. We've tried a lot of things in Fairfield, over a decade, and it has been a struggle to actually say that we're really closing the gap on racial imbalance. We've tried our pre-K. We've since changed the model on that. With open choice, it does have an impact, but it's not enough to actually close. So we are continuing to have those discussions, and the board actually is having a lot of discussion right now just about utilization of our facilities that would impact that as well.
So it's a TBD almost? I mean, you're really trying to assess, it's a TBD, I guess.
It's been a TBD for about a decade, it seems. But yeah, we're still, the current plan hasn't moved the needle with students opting in. We've had the preschools, we've had the open choice. Even taking more open choice students really wouldn't totally fix the imbalance. We're looking at facilities, not necessarily specifically for racial imbalance, but just where the locations of the ECC is going to be, some of the utilization rates of the schools, and as we address these issues, reassess what the diversity is at each school and see where our numbers are. I think it's a bigger issue just from the town in terms of where the diversity is. Moving forward, the Board of Ed is doing the best it can do with the resources that we have and the power that we have.
I'll go back to
Have you,
Mr.
have you lobbied our state reps to try to change the law? Is that part of the strategy?
I can say personally, I've had several discussions, and we had the last couple of years, but I think there are very few districts that are in this situation in the state, and it's a challenging topic, extremely challenging topic, and I think there have been, especially the last couple of years, such huge issues at the state level that this is just not an issue that they're willing to take up at this time.
My understanding is that even our legislatures have tried to introduce bills to get this, because it's a 50-year-old law that has just run its course, and they haven't even been able to get it on the docket for discussion. That's what I've been led to believe, so. Mr. DeWitt?
Yeah, I want to be clear, because clearly, I wasn't clear last year. So the superintendent just said there's 85 open choice children in this budget. I think Ms. Vitale said that the board's going to discuss moving that to 100. Did you not, or?
Maybe, maybe not. I mean, I think that there's a lot happening with what's happening with this budget. I don't want to say we're not going to discuss it. You know, we're facing.
No, you just said it. That's what I'm saying, right?
That we're facing a $700,000 right now reduction.
Yeah.
That is it would be irresponsible for me not to explore revenue to the Board of Education. Open choice is revenue to the Board of Education. So I would see that coming in as part of our discussion on how we are going to close a reduction in our budget. We are also preparing to go back to the state to discuss our racial imbalance plan. So as part of preparing for that, I could see open choice coming up again. I don't mean to lead this board to think that there's an appetite to increase it to 100. We did not give that direction to the superintendent going into this budget. I think that if there was a real appetite among the board to get to that 100, that's what we wanted to do, we would have done it back in January, knowing that we were coming before town bodies with a 4.99 increase.
So we hear this a lot. It's a revenue generator. $3,000 a year is not the cost to the town to educate a child, is it? I thought it to always be like 13,000. I was given a number a long time ago. 3,000 doesn't cut it. I won't force you to a number. 3,000 doesn't cut a year's worth of education. Do we agree?
These students are strategically placed into classrooms where you would not be increasing class size, that you wouldn't have to hire another teacher. If they, as I said, if they need special services, those services are billed back to the district.
Can I caveat what you just said?
You
Because
can.
I think you're absolutely right as to what the intent is. But the reality is, as we found out, the projections can be significantly off in terms of students, as well as I recall from prior years, they can only kind of guarantee, quote-unquote guarantee, that it's not going to trip a section for about 2 years. And they have much less visibility in the further subsequent years as to if having the open choice students will cause a section to trip over to require another teacher. I completely agree of what your intent is. We've had the discussion
yeah.
previously.
Agreed. If somebody comes into kindergarten, demographics change in a particular grade, and there is the possibility that it could be more. I think the research that was done, I think it came out to be one teacher. I don't know if that's still the case,
Right.
because we're in that particular grade.
That was a couple of years ago.
That was a couple of years ago, so maybe there isn't. Maybe it's worse, maybe it's better.
Right.
But point well taken.
And I'd add, that adds to our PPE. That number, that calculation makes that worse. Do we have a racial imbalance issue at our high schools?
No. As
But-
far as by the state, no.
Okay, but we just said you put how many children in the high school, starting in the high school?
Well, it's 6 children in a high school of 1,500. And I might also add that because you have 6 children from Bridgeport, is where they come from, that has nothing to do with diversity as in the children.
See, I'm trying to figure out, I don't know if it was Miss Marmy, the open choice program is intended to help us with our racial imbalance. That's what was just said.
I think.
But yet we took 6 children in this year, and again, I'm just questioning, into the high school where we don't have a racial imbalance issue. So I get it when they come in kindergarten at McKinley, or, well, wherever, yeah, right. But I'm questioning in the high school level why that is.
And that's fair enough. I think it's a different strategy because we wanted to show good faith to the state. The state very much cares that Fairfield is contributing to try to look at balance within our district. We definitely are doing everything we can to show good faith effort, that we're not just ignoring and not complying. And this year, you are absolutely correct. I could have put these children in kindergarten, but given the discussions over the last couple of years, I couldn't guarantee that Ms. Vitale was just talking about that trend over time. I felt very confident that 6 students in our high school were not going to have a big cost driver. And knowing the state of the budget, also high school students are with us for 4 years instead of 13. And once you take a student, you are committed by law to have that student for the entirety of their education. Even if they do, they decided, in the next 2 years to do something with racial imbalance, with the funding for open choice.
I don't know if it was at our quarterly meeting. We hear a lot of that those two are good faith, but I think good faith is starting to cost us real money.
Well, I think compared to the other districts, our good faith has actually cost much less. And I think what Ms. Vitale is saying, we've actually had a revenue
does that
driver.
mean?
That means that in the other districts where they've actually built a lot of magnet schools, they've had to invest heavily, they have really done what the state has wanted us to do. We have really tried a lot of, I feel like, creative solutions to the previous superintendents that came before me, trying pre-K and some other things that they really haven't done. And we have invested less in our district and trying to comply with the state, and I will say good faith effort. We've tried to work with the state. Ultimately, when we go before the state board, we want to be respectful as a school district when we're at those meetings. They do set governance for us, and I think good faith is important, but the district has not done some things that a few other districts have that are much more costly.
What has Westport done? Do they have a magnet school?
I can't answer for Westport. I'm not sure about Westport.
Well, do they have a magnet school? We know that.
They only have very few schools, so I don't even know if they have they don't have a racial imbalance issue. I think it's West Hartford,
So this
us,
is
Greenwich.
Wow, really?
Because I'm getting two different things here. I'm sorry. Is open choice about the racial imbalance, or is it?
Oh,
about
as
good
far as
faith,
open choice,
or is
no,
it about
I'm not sure about
money?
Westport, but Trumbull, all the localities around us, yes, they participate in open choice, not because they have a racial imbalance, but because they believe that it is socially responsible thing to do. I don't want to speak for them, but that's the only, that's my understanding of why they participate. But yes, there are several districts in this region that participate. It's not just Fairfield.
Right. I didn't know, the way you laid it out there was, I didn't know how Westport and the others down the line.
Yeah, they do the same thing that we do. They look at where they think they're going to have open seats. But I don't know if Westport participates. That part I don't know. I do know Trumbull and the regions that are closer around, more Bridgeport, it could be transportation. But again, Westport may participate. I don't know.
What do they do down in Stanford in the Greenwich area?
Greenwich, actually, I have no idea if they participate or not. It's probably too long of a commute for children, I would imagine. But they have a magnet model, and they've invested heavily in that. And they are still on the racial imbalance list with us.
Do we take open choice children at pre-K?
No.
Oh, you just mentioned pre-K, that's why I was a little
Oh, I'm
confused.
sorry, I didn't mean to. Pre-K,
Okay, so the earliest they would come in would be kindergarten.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So racial imbalance is measured by facility, not just district-wide, correct? Or is it?
Well, it's measured by level, so it's measured like by elementary. So our racial imbalance at elementary can look different than it does at the district. Pre-K, when you talk about pre-K, which we have, which are our Fairfield students that are in pre-K, if you have pre-K in your building, your balance is a little bit different with pre-K because it's a different level. So you have pre-K, you have elementary, and then they look at like your secondary level as well, your district level.
So when we take open choice students, as you said earlier, Ms. Vitale, is that we try to place them strategically, least cost impact, but in good faith, and I say that because I don't know that it's being measured any differently than that. These students may not be hitting targets in specific grades or facilities, but overall in the district, we are getting some credit for these students, towards racial imbalance.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Well, to the extent that it's a diverse student. Right?
So, I mean, when I was on the board, we had the open choice issue. So basically what we're doing as a district, forget about racial imbalance right now. We are attempting to do our part as a town in a school system that many other towns do through magnet schools like Greenwich. I know Bridgeport has magnet schools, Trumbull has a magnet school, Norwalk has a magnet school. We don't have a magnet school. So we are trying to do our part to, I guess for lack of a better terminology or phrasing, to help solve some of the inequality and inequities between local school districts. Is that a fair statement?
I would say that there are, and I don't want to speak for the board, but there are different philosophies, I think, within our own community, that there are many who would participate regardless of whether we were on a racial imbalance list
Right.
because they think it's a socially responsible thing to do. And then there are those board members who understand that we need to have a plan that we move forward with and comply with the state of Connecticut.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a smart thing to participate in because we all cherish local control of our school system. And, you know, you hear rumblings from the state at times that some people would like to take that away from us. And I think by doing our part, that in the long run is going to enable us to keep local control of our school system. I think that's part of it.
Why is that?
Because if there's inequality between school districts, like a Bridgeport and a Fairfield, there's politicians in Hartford who would like to regionalize school systems.
They want to do it now.
No, they don't want to do it now. That's not based on that concept. It's based on the number of students in a particular school system. That is what has been proposed, or at least discussed up in Hartford right
I
now.
thought outside of New Haven it was something different than that.
You know, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
as I understand it, there's two proposals in there.
Yeah.
One's for towns under 40,000 population, and one is for student populations under 4,000, or under
Right.
2,000.
Right.
So we wouldn't qualify.
Right.
That's different from what I just said.
Okay. Mr. Walsh?
So in the current year between the previous school year and this school year, you went up by 20 students, correct? From 65 to 85.
That's correct.
And in the high school alone, you went up 12 in the ninth grade alone.
We were up about 70 students. I'd have to look at the exact number, but it was around 72, I think, students. I can find that. Total.
Okay.
In the high school.
But in ninth grade, was it an increase of 12? Is that where you put the students?
That was what's in the book or whatever.
Oh, you're talking about where we placed
Yes.
the students in ninth grade. Yes, we did.
Okay. And we've talked here tonight, Dr. Jones, I've heard you speak about some of the different programs this district's tried in the last 10 years to try to solve the racial imbalancing conundrum. And none have been successful, to be quite honest with you. But the one that's never been tried is redistricting. Isn't redistricting the only real way we're ever going to really solve it?
I think that if you watch the board meetings right now, they're having some really challenging discussions about that very issue, and I think that that's to be explored. But you know, they're really, because there are so few of us in Connecticut that are dealing with this issue. It really hasn't been resolved anywhere by redistricting. Doesn't mean it can't be, but part of that will have to, it's a much deeper dive because you have to look at facility utilization. And just redistricting does not solve it if you don't have enough seats in a close proximity, because Holland Hill is also impending imbalance. So you have to be very careful about how you move students around the district. And the board is doing some heavy lifting right now, looking at all of those issues for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, it seems like everyone's trying to avoid the whole redistricting thing.
I would encourage you to watch our last couple of meetings. Really,
Okay.
truly, they've
All
had
right.
some.
I'll
They've had some
watch
really
it.
good discussions about
Okay.
it.
Because there's also empty seats throughout the district too. So something needs to be kind of done. But I will take you up on that offer, and I will watch the last couple of board meetings to get a little more educated.
some good
instead of-
discussion.
Instead of having a 2-hour discussion here tonight about it.
Okay. Anybody else? Mr. Becker?
Could you just do an update on the open choice, the document you handed out a couple of years ago? I wouldn't call it a study so much, but yeah, the costs, the expenses, the whole summary, you referenced it a little while ago here.
Are you talking about the racial imbalance plan?
No, not the plan. We had asked for an analysis on the open choice program, revenue in, expenses out. I think at the time it ended out to maybe $100,000 expense over a certain period of time.
Yeah. I believe that was with the interim superintendent, Dr. Tracy, and
Yeah,
we
and
have
I'm
not.
not necessarily saying
yeah.
you. I mean more just
Yep.
you know, the administration had done that. It'd be helpful to see an updated version of that in reference to current data, as best as you can, obviously. That might shed some light on this.
We can certainly go in and have a look.
Thank you.
Mr. Walsh?
One last thing on a couple questions on the open choice program, because we hear that it's all about income. There's all this income coming in. And then we hear that there's potential costs because somebody gets in for 2 years and then that district spreads with kids and people move in, and now all of a sudden it is costing us an extra teacher or so. Do you guys monitor that? It seems like it would be a pretty easy thing to monitor every year as you went along of whether you're adding classroom sections because of a child or changes in the demographics of that specific school.
I think that we did an analysis so that we were going to be well informed, but no, once they are here, they are our students, and we work very hard to not be isolating students and sitting here every year as part of the annual budget talking about that one child in 3rd grade where we had to add a teacher. It would not be fair to the children, and once they are in Fairfield, they are our children. So
Well, and I understand that, and I agree with I agree that they should be our children, but I don't think that it should alter that there should be a conversation in regards to what the cost of the program is. If we're going to analyze, we get $3,000 per student as a revenue item, we should look at what is the cost. Not that it's any individual student's, issue that,
picking on somebody.
yeah, we're not
Right.
picking at anybody. We don't want to really,
Right.
we're not asking for names, and we're not asking for, but you should be able to do an analysis pretty easily after the school year starts and after you figure out where your sections are of, you know what, we got hit with $100,000 worth of costs in the open choice program just because the demographics changed. We admitted somebody as a kindergartner, and lo and behold, look, 3rd grade, yeah, we had to add an extra because of some changes in the demographics, more houses being built, and some odd issue of reasons why that changes. You should be able to at least analyze that on a yearly basis.
Well,
Same thing
and-
as if it goes down the next year.
And we have done
credit
that.
for
We
that.
did it over a 10-year trend so that we would be well informed. And we know that every 2 out of 3 years, you may have 2 out of those 3 years, you may have to add 2 teachers over time. But then when you look at the revenue of this year, 255 plus a bonus of 10, we were still in the positive. And then on top of that, we are also getting that, I think it's like 265 this year in our special education billing. So it is still very much, it's a net positive revenue for us when we do the analysis. Certainly, we could do it every year, but
Love to see it. I'd love to, I've never seen it, so that'd be great to see.
we did it 2 years ago and actually presented that, so I could pull that back out.
Love to
But
see
to
it.
do it every year, we don't have the staff to do that. If we were going to do that, we would want to build in more, people that run these analysis. It's usually me and a couple of other people in our office that are also curriculum people doing a zillion other things. But we looked at a 10-year trend to be well informed.
Yeah, I think we'd like to see an update soon. The other thing is the $265,000 you talked about the excess costs, right, for those students? That's just to hold us even, correct? That's the excess
sorry.
cost for those
special
students.
ed part.
So that's not, are you considering that revenue, the 265?
Well, it's a
me,
big
it's a
difference
net.
for us when we went for an awful long time not having that revenue in our budget. So yes, we've taken advantage of what we're allowed to do under the law, and we're able to do that, which you've known that, last year you had that same
Yeah,
same
I
response.
also know
Yeah.
that under the law, we should have been collecting it for a number of years earlier.
Right,
The
I
law
understand that.
was extremely clear that we could have been collecting it, we just chose not to. So,
Well, I think, and I think sometimes that's what I'm talking about, the complexity of what you can and can't do, and understanding when the, educational law is this thick, sometimes there are areas like that you become more well-informed and you take advantage of what you're allowed to do under the law. And
I just want to be
That's-
careful about calling it a kind of a revenue item. It's really not a, it's just.
It is
a-
in the
it's-
revenue line item in our budget, and if it were not here, we would have that expense, which, is $262,116, that would be coming out of our operating budget. So it is revenue.
Well,
only
let's say it another way. You're only reimbursing yourself for the cost that which is a good thing, right? It's something that hadn't been done in the past, so that's not the criticism. But there's no margin on that. You're saying that it's costing you $265,000 to provide special education services to open choice students, and you're billing back for that. So the net should be a zero.
Well, if we were not billing back for that, we would still have those special education services calculated on our caseloads. So a teacher who could have 12 students could only have, for instance, 11, because you're not getting that reimbursement
Okay, but what you're
piece.
not, what that doesn't factor in is if you didn't have the student, you wouldn't have the expense.
That's correct.
Right, so it's a net zero.
Well-
All you're doing is reimbursing yourself for incremental costs that you are incurring to provide the appropriate service level to that student. It's a good thing that a few years ago, we found that we weren't charging it and that you started charging it, so I understand that. All Mr. Walsh's point is net is zero.
Well, certainly, if the 85 children were not in our school system, we would have no cost whatsoever. I think everybody knows that.
Yeah. So it's a revenue item, but the expenses are increased by the same amount. So.
Right.
Without
Both
the
sides
kids,
of the
the
balance sheet.
expense
Right.
level would be lower.
Okay. Glad we cleared that up. Anybody else on revenue line items? Anything else on revenue? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll start on page 23 in the book.
Eating any of it.
I'm going to call the meeting back to order, and we're on page 23, which is the pie chart that was in the superintendent's budget. So the one thing I had a request on this, I don't know if anybody else did, it'd be real interesting to see what these splits were in prior years. So could we go back maybe 5 years and just see, and we can make it easy. I'd be very interested in staff costs versus the rest of the costs. You can break it out as much as you want, I don't care. But just see what the percentage is. Yeah. Yeah, there's no, whether it's lower or whatever, I don't care. I just want to know what the percentages are. Let's go to page 25, or as I like to refer to it, the Wally Flynn schedule, which is by type of expense. It goes salary, benefits, instructional service, contractual services. And this is, we can get into the level of detail. Mr. DeWitt is chomping at the bit to go to ECC and all that. So we can certainly get into that. Obviously, the largest driver here is staff salaries. So with that in mind, can I ask, I'm going to refer back one last time to the superintendent's presentation. And can we go to the 15-year historical enrollment here? Again, thanks for these graphs and stuff. They were great. Can we do two things here? Number one, on this 15-year historical enrollment graph, can we add in what the classroom staff level is? So classroom personnel, staff level were for each of the years that were presented. So we're tracking enrollment. It'd be real interesting, considering our largest expense items, our personnel costs, to see what the staff levels were relative to enrollment levels. And the other thing I noted was, in talking about all the projections going forward into future years, the enrollment projections, I didn't see any of it on the totals. So we have this historical enrollment. I just didn't see the schedule on the totals. So can we see the schedule? You know, where is that 9,685? Where is that projected to be over the next number of years? I know you have it with all the individual components, but I didn't see the totals. Maybe I just missed it. But those are two items relative to staffing that we'd like to see, if you don't mind. Okay, any other comments on those schedules themselves? Mrs. Marmion?
I have just kind of a random question out there, but where, I know, Dr. Jones, you're leaving, we're going to be searching for a new superintendent. How do we budget for the search committee or to find the new superintendent and projected potential contract increases? Where is that? Is it budgeted, or do we need to find that money?
The search is budgeted. Do you remember which item it is? Dues and fees.
And what, just tell us what that cost is.
See if I think it's in the text. Was it 50? Yeah.
We put 50,000 in for the search.
Where is it?
Just for travel, for superintendents coming to visit, for the consultant, for, telephone calls, for advertising, background searches.
Yeah. I know. I do want to follow the schedule itself, so,
Okay, just wanted to,
yep.
okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's go to page, if we don't have any other questions or comments on the request that I just made, let's go to page 25. And I started with, and the reason I did it was staff salaries and all that. So we're on number 1, and this is the largest driver. If we look, the estimated differential from this year to next year is 3.12. As compared to budget, it's 4.29, that growth. And my understanding is there were some additional positions hired this year over and above what was in the original budget. We've spoken about this briefly at quarterlies. Do you want to go into that just a little bit to refresh our memories, please?
Sure, but it sounds like you're on the superintendent's book. If you're on the Board of Ed version, that in the text area up above, it didn't get changed. So it's 3.17 and 4.33.
Oh, okay. Close enough for government work. Okay, but go ahead. Let's,
What's the number supposed to be, 4.27?
In this current year, that we had a 10.9 FTE were added, and we did provide that in the quarterly report to you. There were 5.9 teachers, 2 elementary for class size, 1.9 special education, 1.0 tech integration, and 1.025 in sections all across the high school, and 4.7 special education paras. So the bulk of it is special education.
where did the reductions come to pay for those, to keep you within budget for the year, just so we're aware?
Those are, I thought we actually walked through the
We might have.
givebacks
Just
here.
remind me, yeah.
Yeah, it's all over the budget.
Okay, so it wasn't like one big thing that was,
No, this year the salary line, as we talked about at that quarterly, was a challenge for us. And we're talking about overtime, it's everything, not just one group of salaries. And we have done givebacks, which means we've gone back into every aspect of the school district to make sure that we're getting through the year.
right. And the driver of the differential was the fact that the students were in different places than they thought we were when we budgeted? What drove the difference, the need for 10 new teachers?
Well, every year is different. Elementary is based on class size. So as you look at that array in the back, we actually know where we have a possibility of going up, where we have a possibility of going down, and you don't know until the children actually show up. So if there are 1 or 2 children away from making another section, then we have to add another teacher in September. Special education are generally driven by caseloads, the number of special needs children who either move into the district, caseload increases, same way with paraprofessionals. If we have an increase like in our CLC program, because a student moves in who needs a one-on-one para, we have to add that by law, so that's generally where we see the increases.
And is that what happened in this past year?
Yes. I mean, that's what happens every year. We try to move paras from one building to the other if we can, but if they're a one-on-one para, you have to by law leave them there, so you would have to add a para. But that's pretty typical every year. We have to watch class size. We may actually go down going into the budget, which is pretty typical right now for elementary, but then we know we may end up going back up 1 or 2. And we, unlike other districts, we don't build in like contingencies, a big $500,000 contingency, so if you need to add staff. So we have to find that from within our budget.
Other questions? We're going to open it up now to discuss staffing in that. Go ahead, Mr. Walsh.
Did you say 4.2 employees in special ed in Paris?
4.7.
4.7. And then how many did we, I know there was an increase in special ed staff that we had budgeted in based on
This was,
Mr. Mancusi's presentation on what we were going to be doing. And we had funded a number of spots, right, in last year's budget.
This year, we added, that was in the budget.
Yes,
We were
in the
adding
budget.
like ECC section.
yes.
We added CLC section, CLCS. Those sections were already in there. These are paras above and beyond that 4.7. Part of that could be additional, could be ECC.
Yep.
It depends just where the need is.
Okay. Do you know how many we added in the budget for last year? And then,
Do you know what we had for this? Oh. Do you remember? Oh, you've got it.
We have gotten all the history. We added 9.4 certified and 11 non-certified.
and 11 non-certified?
But many of those were attached to programs. So the CLCS, which is at Riverfield, which is keeping our kids in district, again, that program we could calculate like we did on that other impact program. Those programs, the ECC was the same way that we actually built into the budget. Those are ones that were attached to programs.
All right.
Can I
So
follow
in
up
the
on
end, it looks like we're total, it's like 24, 25 total brand-new people in special education in 1 year, right? Between 9 and 11 plus 4.7.
I think Ms. Mansell's just checking that number for us, but given the programs that we've added in order to save money in district, that was we had a big programming issue this year, not an issue, a programming focus for us. Do you have that number? So our total special education FTE changes for 18-19 was 21.1. And that does include, again, the specialized programs.
Thank you.
We have Mr. DeWitt, and then we'll come to Mr. Brown.
Yeah, just a follow-up on that. The additional 4 FTEs for special ed, what schools were they added?
Are you talking about this current year or next
Yeah.
year? In the current year, we had 3 ELL paraprofessionals that were in the district. I would have to ask Mr. Cummings where those actually landed. We also had a CLC special education para at Tomlinson. There were 3. And that was for a new program there to keep students in district. We had a special education trainer at Tomlinson, which is a 1.0. Again, that's unique programming. CLC was a new program at Tomlinson. We also had our CLCS special education trainer at Riverfield. We had 2 of those, which was for our behavior program at Riverfield. And we had a paraprofessional at 2.0 also at Riverfield. So those are the staff additions that were planned that were non-certified.
So I think we talked about this last year. There was an issue with, we talked about the possibility of consolidating some of the special ed programs, and the comment was made, I think by the director, that, well, the kids want to be in their own schools, Tomlinson, right? Instead of taking those kids and moving them to another school, there was a new program put in place at Tomlinson. So is that what was funded by those people, or were staffed by those people?
Well, what happens is if our program, for instance, at Woods, CLC, is running full, and we know that we can add a program, instead of adding another program at Woods, we didn't add an additional program just to have a feeder pattern. But this is much better for us because students prefer to go to school if they can, where siblings are, where they're actually in the feeder pattern to stay with their friends when they go to high school. That's important because the CLC programs, our high schools are big enough enough, they exist there. Elementary, we just have a few. They're actually consolidated at just a few schools.
So I think you're saying even if you added another program at Woods, you'd have added the same amount of heads?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Is it just by coincidence that all the other placements are at Riverfield at a 504 that's not full? It wasn't done, the other additions you mentioned are at Riverfield. Is it by coincidence that that's a 504 school that's not completely full? Is that why they were put there?
No, we look at a couple different things. We look at feeder pattern. We look at what specialized program is already in a building. So Riverfield is a primary example where they did not have an early childhood program. They did not already have a CLC program, and we try to spread some of those unique programs around to the building so that the staff can build up their capacity to also work with those unique programs and the principal.
Okay.
Mr. Walsh.
Is it fair to say that the largest driver, both in the salary and in the entire budget, is the teacher's contract that was just signed?
No.
No? Okay. Explain why.
The best thing to look at to see the increase in salaries is on this, on that placemat.
My placemat? Yeah.
Right. On the upper left-hand corner, the salaries
Yep.
section. It breaks down each of the components. So the largest is the 2.15% is existing teaching staff.
Right, so that's their increases. That's the contract.
Is that the contract?
Yes.
So that's the largest.
So that is the largest driver.
Okay.
My question was, I should have broken it down. So the largest driver in the salary section is the new teacher contract.
It's the largest driver, period.
Yes, because
And it also is the largest driver in your entire budget.
Right. They're our largest
Both.
group of employees, right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. And is the administrator salaries, I know the RTM is voting next week on that. Is that taken into account in the administrator line at all? Or is that, do you hold money somewhere in the budget in case there is an increase, kind of like the way the town?
It's in wage and benefit, yeah.
It's in wage and benefit. Okay. Benefit reserve. Got it. Okay. And that'll obviously because that's only like a bargaining unit of 40 or 40-something, it's a very small amount. So that's not a big driver,
Correct.
despite the fact of whatever their increase is. Okay. The staff replacement line with the negative, that's the prediction of what you're saying that you're going to save, almost like the retirement versus hiring someone new, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And for the current year, I noticed in your description under the budget projection, you had, for the current year's budget that we're in right now, you had a budgeted amount of a savings of just slightly over $1.2 million, correct?
That's not savings.
Well, it's a negative
That's a-
number, so.
That's a deficit.
Okay. It's a deficit, explain that.
The estimated salaries are projected to be higher than the amount budgeted.
They're higher, they're supposed to be higher, okay. So explain to me then where you say to date only $711,000 of that amount has been recovered, leaving a deficit of $510,000. That's from the second paragraph under budget projections on page 24.
Yeah. We did realize savings in retirements and staff turnover, but what we budgeted was 1.22 million. Okay, we actually subtracted 1.220 from our budget.
Yeah.
For salary for retirements and turnover. We realized at this point in time when we did the book, we realized 711,000 in savings, which left a current deficit of 510 in that.
And I guess that's what I was kind of saving. The 1.2 is kind of a savings, right? It's a credit against it's against what the total budgeted salary is. But whatever.
It'd be a savings if that was our expenses, but not when it's
Yes.
our budget.
Yes. And How many teachers did you predict would retire
19.
in last year, in the current year's
This
budget?
year's 19,
19?
yes,
And how many did you realize retiring?
16.
16. And in the current year's budget, how many are you budgeting retiring?
17.
17. And how do you predict what you're going to be doing in that regard?
Mr. Rasmussen, Dr. Rasmussen does an analysis for us based on age. And it did come out, I think, a little bit higher, but maybe I think at 19 again, and we reduced it down to 17.
Okay. And what's his average been compared to, how accurate has he been?
He's been pretty good
Pretty good?
since he's been doing it, yeah.
Okay. So with 3 less retiring, how much is that costing you? How much do you plan per teacher?
What we were planning was 40,000. What we were
40,000.
realizing was 20. So we had, if you remember from the quarterly report, we had an issue of, you know, the total number, the volume, and then the turnover. Wasn't realized.
Yeah, we did talk about this at the quarterly.
We had both issues. Teachers coming in were higher.
Yep,
Yeah.
yes, okay. So, since I saw the salary increases that you have placed inside the budget, early on in the budget page that we talked about, Mr. Lynn mentioned it earlier on page 3. This is the first year of a 3-year contract, correct? Second year? Yep.
Oh, for the next year's
Yes.
budget. Next year will be year 2
Next year will be year 2. So,
for teachers.
This represents the second year of that of the 3-year contract.
so this will be the worst year of the increase?
No.
No, next year.
Next year? Well, it says 2.92 for the 2019.
Next year, it goes to like
2020.
3.4, 3.5.
In
3.52.
2021, it says 3.52.
Yes, but the differential in increases,
Oh, that's what you mean.
that's what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. So we'll already have had the 2.92 added on. So next year for fresh money, we're only going to be going up 0.6.
No,
Oh, maybe I'm wrong.
you're not reading it right. You're going up 3.52 next year.
Oh, an additional 3.52.
Yes, these are
Okay.
all-
Oh, okay. Okay.
You
So-
reset at the beginning of each year.
All right.
You're setting
So it's
the
going to be
bar
drastically worse next year.
3.52 to 2 point, whatever.
To 3.52.
Yep.
Okay.
What else on staff salaries? Mr. Brown?
The new staff that's hired, there's a direct correlation, or is there a direct correlation with the impact program? So it saves, so in other words, you're hiring to reduce the outplacement students?
That's correct. That was that slide tonight in the
Right.
budget.
So there's a savings of $1 million there,
A minimum, yes.
a minimum.
Is it, can I ask a follow-up on that? Because I want to understand this. Is that an actual savings or a cost avoidance? In other words, are we bringing students back into district and actually saving the money by not having them outplaced? Or is it just, if we didn't do this, we would have to outplace more? You see the subtle difference?
It's really both. And because this changes every year, but we have been bringing students back into the district with our programming. And we've been keeping students in the district that we know for sure would have needed an outplacement if we didn't have a unique program.
Could we just get dollar amounts on the actual cost saved? You know, I know how tricky this gets. We don't want to know who the kids are or anything like that, but how much did we actually save by bringing them back?
Yeah,
here
I mean,
versus how much do we cost avoidance.
Yeah, there really is no way to actually give you that real number. You can on a student who perhaps has been out, and we could say we've been able to bring a student back in. But students that are going in and out placement could be 65,000 or they could be 150,000. We could use the 116, or 106 per student and give you a ballpark number, but
Yeah, you're confusing me. I guess what I'm saying is you had, and I make this up, right? This is illustrative purposes only. Last year, you had 7 students that needed to be outplaced. Those 7 students were all brought back into the district this year because of these new hires. So you know how much they cost you to outplace them. So now they're back in the district. You saved all that. That's real savings versus what those additional teachers cost, and that's your net real incremental savings versus cost avoidance is separate, and that's what you would have had to. You see what I'm saying?
you can look at it both ways. And then we could look at cost avoidance. We could look at how many students did we bring back in the district, but it would be not even just for FERPA reasons, because we have so many children, different costs. So if we brought 9 students back times 106,000, that's your number. It's just, right around $1 million. I mean, I can answer that if we brought 9 back. And I know we brought at least 9 students.
I don't understand why we can't be more specific.
We don't even provide that information to the board on specific students. And outplacements, we can have a student in the district who is $150,000. Well, we may only have 3 of those, or we may have students who are $120,000. And
I'm not even asking.
And we don't want our parents to believe that we're building programs because it's best for children. And if it actually is able to save money in the district because we feel like we're providing a better service, that truly is what we're doing. And I think if you look at page 151, you can see we provide you the outplacement numbers, we provide you the gross projected tuition. You can see what's happening with that, what those numbers are, and that's the level of detail that we are comfortable providing outside of the school division who have access to students' confidential information.
Why is it confidential information if we brought 7 kids back in and it saved us $1 million?
Well, that's what I can tell you. 7 times 106,000, if you calculate that, then you can say that. We could certainly say, here's how many students we've been able to bring back in the district and use the average cost. We can certainly do that, but it's that simplistic. If it's $110,000 and we brought 7 or 9 kids back, it's 9 times that dollar amount.
Okay, so if we're not doing this, for me, fine. Okay, you're not going to provide it to me. Is somebody on your staff tracking that?
You would not see this number where it is right now if we weren't doing due diligence in every aspect of special education funding. We are one of the only school districts that you're going to see a first quarter, which we shared with you, where even just in our tuition cost alone, we had cost savings. And that is, we haven't been able to do that. The last 2 years, we were before the Board of Finance, and by the beginning of the year, we were already, 1.2, 1.3 in the negative. And kudos to Mr. Mancusi and all of his staff. They look at this, I'd say, on a daily basis, and are really working with families to help them understand that we have some great programming going on in the district.
I don't doubt that whatsoever.
So yes, we watch it with due diligence. That's why you're seeing the budgeting numbers that you are, where we're trending in the right direction.
So let us know how many came back into the district, and for purposes of this exercise, use the average cost. I hope somebody internally is looking at the real cost, that's all.
But if I may, just to follow up on it? Oh, okay, go ahead. So, Mr. Flynn, are you asking, so if it's, let's just use your numbers, 7 times $106,000, that's what the outplacement would have been. But I think what you're asking is that drives 2 new teachers and they're at $50,000 apiece. So it's not really $700,000, it's $500,000. Is that where you're going?
There's a net, and I get it. And it's not all just a cost, to the superintendent's point. It's
Right.
not just all dollars and cents. It's also quality of programming and all that.
Right.
But we're a finance board. If you're going to make assertions that it's
Well, we
saving
gave
money
them on
and you're
this
going to
slide.
justify the decision on the fact that it's cost effective to do it that way,
That's exactly what it
prove it
costs.
to me.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. Okay.
Mr. Mottola. Yeah, you can come on up, Mr. Mancuso. Thank you.
Just for example purposes, just the cost of hiring the 5 licensed clinical social workers for our impact program to replace ESS, which was in existence prior to our impact program. That contract had costed the board $613,000 per year. The cost of the 5 LCSWs was like $450,000.
You got to help me with acronyms because I have no idea what.
ESS is Effective School Solutions. That was the contracted service that we had with the organization.
That was the outplacing.
No, that was the staff that we contracted for prior to replacing Effective School Solutions with our own staff. So we hired five.
Oh, so the kids were in our district, but an outsourced entity.
Correct.
Okay.
Are these full-time employees you're hiring?
Yes.
And the
But my
costs you're
point-
quoting are what costs?
Well, right.
The annual
My
cost?
point coming up here is just to say annually that contract was, we were paying $613,000 for the staff that we currently pay approximately $450,000. And I think
plus benefits.
yes. Yeah.
So does the 450
same.
include benefits or no?
No way.
Yeah, I think it did include the benefits.
So it's
That was
equal.
salary and benefits, yes.
That's salary and
It's
benefits?
salary and benefits?
Yes.
So, I was writing real fast when you were rattling off the,
I was trying to figure
And
out
he's
what
an
the
attorney,
acronyms
so
are.
you know it's chicken scratch.
Still don't know what.
That's right.
LCL,
People say I should have been a
CLS,
doctor, but,
CLC, and
so there was, you hired, you brought in 10.9 unbudgeted staff for this year, and I think you said that, was it 4 were special education teachers, 4 point something?
I'm trying to find, sorry.
4.7, I wrote down. No, those are pairs. So how many full-time certified teachers did you hire this year for special education?
1.9.
Oh, okay, just 1.9, all right. And had you, I don't know if you can answer this question. If you didn't hire that teacher, would the student or students who that teacher was teaching, would those students have been outplaced? Or you just don't know?
He's just talking about general hiring.
Yeah, without going back and looking at particular, and there's so many ins and outs, yeah. It could be a caseload issue, just stay in compliance for federal law, not necessarily for a student who needs a significant service.
So let me just kind of like, maybe this is going to be way too general. So I'm looking at page 25, and here's the thing that strikes me about your salaries budget. It's, your actual for 17-18 was $105,394 and change. And then last year, your budgeted was 108,127. But as we've discussed, your estimated actual is 109. So you're 1.2 million over. And then your proposed budget for 1920 goes up to 112,812. So you actually have a $4 million increase from 17-18 to your estimated actual for this year, and then you have another almost $4 million, $3 million and change proposed for next year. And I guess my question to you, that's a big jump. It's a significant amount of money, but are you saying that this, not this number, but a number like this, if you hadn't brought in some of the special ed students in-house, would it be a larger number? Is that pretty much what you're saying? And I don't think you're able to,
No, that number
from what Mr. Flynn said or talked about,
I think what you're asking is, is the investment in our programming actually having an impact and reducing the budget in other areas?
Whole budget,
Yes, but when we go from a contracted service, if we put it on this salary line.
I understand,
Yeah, the
yeah.
salary line may go up, but the programs are definitely working for us.
I mean, this salary line could go down, but on another line, it might be much higher because you're outplacing a bunch of students, correct?
Correct.
Oh, okay, all right. But that's kind of a hard thing for you to delineate according to your answers to Mr. Flynn's questions.
I think if you think about it, on page, and I'm not sure if Mr. Flynn's trying to go in order, but on page 35 where we have the tuition, so, you know, when you look at that 0.42% increase over on that right-hand side, our tuition is where you're really seeing that offset. Our 17-18 to 18-19 budget saw a 6% increase there. So we would have expected with our tuition line to have our annual percentage increases, just because tuition goes up, just like everything else, plus adding more students that are actually tuition placed. And you'll notice this year, you don't see that. That tuition line increase is $25,000. And that's not a number that's normal, because these programs are working.
Okay.
But to Mr. Mottola's point, back on the placemat, which I want to meet the English teacher that spelled the word wrong in here, because I'm really
Yeah, we
disappointed in that. So,
Yeah.
the top line, 2.15%. That's, we know what that is. But when you look down 4 lines and it says new staff at 0.41%, isn't that what Mr. Mottola's talking about? Those are the brand-new ads that have nothing to do with contracts or anything like that. It's almost 0.5% of that total change there is just new teachers, right? Because I think that's what you're asking, right, Jen?
Yeah.
There's a component of everybody got a little more through a contract agreement.
And then we have
Then
11
there's
new
brand-new teachers.
Not 11, but new staff for this year, that was unexpected.
That's right. I think that's that 0.41%, is it not?
The .41 is for the new staff that we're proposing in the 1920 budget. The line below that is the .4% is the 18-19 unbudgeted staff.
So it's really 0.8%. Total for what was lacking from last year and added this year, it's 0.8%.
Lacking for the portion of unbudgeted positions, yes.
Right. So is that's what you're talking about, right?
Right.
So it's almost a 1%. So your point is that that's almost not quite as big a number as the contract, but it's kind of getting there.
Big number.
Yeah, right? 0.8% versus 2.51. It's a third of the big number, or less than a third of the big. More than a third, sorry.
Thank you. You mentioned several times before us that fewer high school students are migrating out to private schools. Is that driving new hires, new teacher hires? Is it at that point, or is it not really measurable?
Anytime you have enrollment in high school, because by contract, their class sizes are set, how many students they can teach, every time you enroll above what we have planned, it can or cannot have an impact. And this year, it was just over a 1.0, but that was spread out across the high school.
Right. Okay, thanks. And are you projecting that for whatever the current number is, projecting that for your next year?
This year we were up 74 students, and I would anticipate that the projection of 2,991, which is 74 lower, is going to be at least 74, and it could be higher.
Higher, okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions related to staffing? Seeing none, let's go to benefits. I'm just going to cut to the quick on this one. The write-up says that the estimates here for the increase in benefits of 6%. Mr. Mayor, this is coming over to you. This came from Aon?
They
health insurance?
They suggested 7%, so we budgeted 7% on actual.
Right. So do we have a latest update from Aon? Anything? I know they don't do it anymore.
The
'cause it goes
state
through the
doesn't
state.
issue their rates until April. So this is what things are trending, what they anticipate the state.
Based on, who did the trending? Like, what information?
National trends.
National trends. Do
Yeah,
we
so
have
that's what-
anything from
yeah.
state trends? Anything?
And I can see if I can get an update.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see if there's best available information here. That's what I'm trying to get. Any other questions on benefits? This comes from the estimate from Aon, and of course, once again, the state will be behind us on this. Any other questions? Going once, going twice. Let's go to instructional services. It's up 4.33%, 167,000. Do we have any specific questions, or what can you tell us on this?
The majority of the increase for the 126,000 line 71 was for early childhood center, and we had to add additional consultation services for an additional classroom.
So this is ECC, correct?
That's correct, early childhood center.
Mr. DeWitt, you said you have a plethora of questions. This could be a time.
Okay. I'm sorry, you're adding what for ECC? That's a contracted service to?
This is a consultation. We have a consultation group that actually works with our CLCs, with our ECC. It's an outside group,
So outside consultant.
yes.
Okay.
What do they do? I'm sorry.
I'll let Mr. Mancusi, he could answer that better than I.
You're getting your exercise tonight. It's quite good.
Dr. Jones is correct. That is adding additional consultation time through, we have a consulting organization who specializes in working with students with multiple developmental disabilities, primarily autism. It's the Center for Children with Special Needs. It's Dr. Michael Powers' groups. Anybody who works in the field of autism knows that Dr. Powers has been in district, and his group has been in district for well over 15 years. Kudos to my predecessor for bringing him and his group here, with adding an additional CLC as part of the ECC, growing enrollment. We've added that additional consultation time to handle the increase in number of students who require this specialized programming. And it really is quite specialized programming.
Of the 126 increase, how much of that is?
That, it's approximately, I would say, about $65,000.
65.
$40,000, excuse me.
40,000?
Is that it? Yeah,
What's the
40,000.
Yeah, what's the rest of the one? So the increase was 126, so what's the 86,000? It was 126,000
An
increase.
increase of approximately $50,000 for occupational therapy, an increase of approximately $22,000 in physical therapy, and then we have an increase of about $12,000 in our audiological services contract with CREC.
So it's primarily driven by special education, is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's all special education.
Yeah.
So it's not all ECC, though, but it's all special education?
Correct.
Right. And you want a ECC question?
Sure.
So, thank you for the, so I'm on page 7 right now, just, not that I want to go back, but, so in 18 and 19, which is right now, there's 165 children, and 130 are there because of, and I quote, we have a requirement to have those children in ECC, correct?
Correct.
35 are just pre-K kids, right?
Yes.
Okay. And 13 of those are English learners.
14.
14, excuse me. Okay. The 35 just going to pre-K, do they pay a tuition?
Yes, and they either pay full tuition, sliding tuition, or if they qualify for free or reduced, under that category, they could have free tuition.
Including the English learners?
Yes,
Yeah. The 130 obviously don't pay a tuition, is that correct?
that's correct.
Okay. So, and we're headed to 186. Is it a fair assumption that the additional 21 children in the 1920 budget are going to be special needs children?
Primarily, yes.
Okay. So I've been watching all the budget meetings, and I reached out to a couple of your colleagues on the Board of Ed, and I think it came up tonight. The perfect mix here is 50-50, right?
Absolutely.
50 special ed children and 50 just pre-K kids, and they get indoctrinated, and right. But we're not there.
No, not close, no.
And it's fair to say that we're not going to get there even when we expand to Stratfield and a second location to be determined, correct?
I think we really don't know right now because there are so many changes. We have moved the program from Burr, which was always our program that always had a wait list. It was a very popular pre-K program. We've moved that to Stratfield. We've taken both of our general education pre-Ks and made those ECC. So right now, we're in the process of enrolling, and I would say we'll be much more informed probably by May or June, but it all depends on how many students actually enroll.
Okay. So it went from Burt to Stratfield.
But that's a regular pre-K to an ECC classroom, which is different.
So at Stratfield, it's just pre-K? There's no special education children there?
No, right now, there is one class that is ECC and one class that has been part of the general education pre-K. Next year, both of those existing classes will be ECC. The classroom that was at Burr is moving to Stratfield, plus there's another classroom built in the budget. There will be 4 ECC classrooms at Stratfield next year.
So in your notes here, 2018, 2019, we had 6 classrooms at ECC, which is Ward, yes? Is that right? And 1 at Stratfield. In the next year, it'll be 6 at ECC and 4 at Stratfield.
That's correct.
So the classrooms that are in conjunction with Ward, there's an interaction with the high school children, right? Do they not have don't they get involved in a pre-K, the early childhood learning? Or
that's a different program.
It's completely different from the ECC?
It's completely different, yes.
Okay. So everything run at ECC is run with our employees?
Well, they're all our employees, but I think the program you're referencing is more what you would find in technical ed, where the students come a few days a week, just for a few hours, and young people who want to grow up and work in the childcare industry are actually taking that course. That's different from what we're talking about here.
Okay.
Yes.
Because my question was going to be, do you lose that aspect of it when you go to Stratfield because it's not high school, so you don't?
No, we don't.
Where do you think our second location is going to be? And is it going to be at a 504 school like Stratfield?
And ultimately, that'll be a board decision. We did a presentation at the last board meeting. All my weeks are running together. I think it was last week. And we did actually apply a rubric to all of our buildings across the district. Mr. Mancusi, you may know off the top of your head the top 3. But it had to do with which buildings have air conditioning, because our youngest learners need that, which buildings are more ADA accessible, which one of our buildings have the most restrooms, so that for pre-K students, there would be a bathroom and you could still accommodate kindergarten and expand. So we have provided that to the Board of Education, and they'll make that determination at some point.
Is the location driven by, what was the comment you used before, regionalization or local schools? It's not driven by that, right? The fact that...
Well, we've applied a rubric to every building in the district and provided that information to the school board. And one aspect of that rubric is obviously the location. So if you were going to put an early childhood at Dwight, that's a really long travel. And that building also doesn't have air conditioning and other things. But that would be a lot of travel time for little ones on the bus. But we've applied that rubric to every building, not just because it was 504 or 378 or... we applied it to every building.
Just so you know, the rubric that we applied, it was looking at buildings in their current, facilities in their current state, according to ADA accessibility. If the building was air-conditioned, the playground space, if it was move-in ready, and number of classrooms with restrooms, and the potential for expansion with more classrooms as the program grows with bathrooms, location, and just the overall functionality of
So is there
the
a
building.
finance aspect to this line of questioning? Just, I want to know what the...
Well, I guess I'm getting off topic. I'm just wondering how this is affecting the overall school population into 504. It feels like we're filling 504s with these kids. So I'll make this my final question, because you're right, I'm going off topic. Does the ECC going to play a part in any redistricting?
Location would, potentially. If you put it in a school that you need to move kids out of, it could play a role in redistricting. The board is not there in terms of deciding what schools the ECC will be at. We just made a decision that it would not be in one location, simply because there was not space, and we did not want to take over. If it was going to be one location, without building a new school, we would need to take over a full elementary school to accommodate, growing enrollment. So we are looking at, what 2 sites would be, based on the rubric that Mr. Mancusi provided with us.
Okay. So, well, what I was really getting to, the financial I was really getting to was, do we ever get to a point where this is, where the pre-K is a revenue driver again? Where we're at 50/50? Are we a revenue driver at 50/50? Where there's preschool children coming in with revenue?
Every year is different. I mean, and it just, because even if it's 50/50, on some years you will have more students who are fee paying, some years you don't, and it's first come, first serve as far as when students are, registering for pre-K.
But you're limiting the amount of, aren't you eliminating, or, yeah, I'm sorry, limiting the amount of paid openings by the fact that we're obligated to have some children there?
I would say it's the opposite. We're actually trying to increase our peer ratio, which means more tuition students. But again, it will depend on the number of students. And when you look at the trend on that page 7 of how pre-K has grown, will we be able to have 50/50, 60/40? You don't know until you watch this trend over the next 2 or 3 years. But the goal would be having more tuition students because you want to increase the peer number. Our peer number is too low right now.
Yeah, we're not even close to 50/50 split.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Mr. Walsh?
Just to follow up on Mr. DeWitt, for the 1920 year on page 7 under the ECC enrollment growth chart, 21 seems to be a fairly large growth. What's causing that growth for this year that you budgeted?
I might say I've been working on pre-K a lot over the last couple of weeks, and we're almost at the 165. We have 17 right now waiting for evaluation, and so you try to look at the trends and how that's growing. We were lucky, I think, from last year to this year, it didn't go up a little bit more. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Mr. Mancusi.
No, just what you said, the number of students that we currently have being on the docket to be evaluated, we're going to get really close to that 165.
I'm not talking about the 165. I guess I'm talking about the next year for the budget we're talking about, getting up to 186, which is a 21 student increase. There must have been some numbers that went into that decision.
Well, we look at lots of things. We look at how many children are going to kindergarten, how many of them are going to stay with us, how many children, where is the number of pre-K right now, and how many evaluations are we doing on a monthly basis. And it is a projection. It is for sure a projection. And that number, that 186 would not change as far as how we are budgeting from the 165 to 186. What it will mean is that the classroom's going to be fuller going into next year. So instead of having 8 children, you start on 10 sections, you're adding 2 or 3 more children, which is where we reached, where we had just maxed out the classrooms that we had. It'll just mean we would max out quicker if we hit it, but that's just a realistic projection based on everything we know today.
Okay, so there won't be any cost increase from 165 to 186 anywhere else in the budget?
It's already in the budget as far as adding an extra section and converting to general ed to regular ed. So there wasn't an additional cost necessarily for that, but we've changed those 2 pre-K sections to be ECC.
All right. And if the number got bigger than 186, you'd have to add a teacher on?
It's all based on caseload for children.
Yes, okay.
Okay, any other questions on this? Seeing none, let's go to contracted services. I'm on page 33 in the book that I have. The large drivers here are professional and technical services and other services. There's a couple of consultants being hired. You want to speak to that, and then you can talk about the other services again. Ms. Manzel, I think, and
Special education.
who wants to take the professional?
Oh. There are two large drivers in there. The first one is the 50,000 was added to technical consulting, and that's for a facility study. Goes along with what we were just mentioning before. The board are having a lot of heavy-duty facilities discussions, so it's been built in. If they need to hire a consultant to help look at facility utilization, the money will be there. The other big one in here is the 100,000, which was included for professional services, and it was to just look at feasibility of air conditioning all of our buildings. What would that cost be, what's already existing in every building, just so that the board would be well informed about the best way long-term to start looking at how to tackle that, because we're having challenges not having air conditioning in all of our schools.
What's the challenges with the air conditioning?
Well, you know, I'd say the biggest challenge is health and it's safety. Right now, several of our buildings have 21st century windows that don't open like they did, you know, back in 1960. They open a little bit for safety. They don't have air conditioning in the classrooms, and you can't open the doors anymore like when we were all kids, at least when I was a kid. You opened the doors, you opened the windows. Buildings were built to have cross breeze. We don't get to benefit from any of that, and especially this fall, this was very much on our radar because we had some real challenges. We had, you know, people who are really getting, from a health standpoint, it makes them sick. When the classrooms start getting up to, you know, 95 and some hotter, it's hard, and definitely impacts instruction for those children who are in buildings that are having those extremely high and hot days. We also have just challenges with little kids being in classrooms that don't have air. Some of our buildings we've been able to put in some window units, but every building is different. But it is a health and it is a safety issue for us. Safety, we can't open our doors and windows anymore, and when it's that hot.
Can't open the doors. Which doors can't you open? The doors to the outside or the doors?
If you
like
think
on
about we have, you know, a lot of our classrooms were designed in the 50s and 60s. So even like Sherman, you think about that, they all had outside doors. So if you have two classrooms, you would open your doors, open your hall doors, and I could still remember what it feels like. That breeze would come through and you'd be like, it was cooling. And we can't do that anymore because of safety. And it's like being in a little sweat box. And, you know, I would invite any of you this spring, really, and I mean this sincerely, if you want to get an idea of what's happening, because it's really, truly making some of our teachers sick. And I know for me, I can't imagine not working every day, all day without air conditioning. People aren't acclimated, and our kids aren't either that way. But more than anything, it's the buildings are shut down so tight. And we have cool zones. Most of our media centers, as a matter of fact, I think all of the media centers are cool. But it's just not enough. That really instruction has to stop. So a teacher, you know, they just all have to go sit in the media center and they do the best that they can. But it's really not educationally what we should be.
Okay.
So
Mr. Walsh?
if this is approved, you'll be able to give us some type of quote on how much it's going to take to get the rest of the entire district air conditioned?
Yeah, and I welcome, if you want real detail, Mr. Collin might be able to speak better to that, but it really was to get a consultant to come in and evaluate a really deep dive on our buildings so that we know what is in every building, because, you know, we hear of certain buildings where they actually ran the ductwork, but they didn't put the unit in, but nobody really knows what's up in the ceiling until they go and look. So this would be to do that work for us.
Okay. I don't think we need that level of detail.
I just want one other quick question. In regards to the air conditioning, are there districts going to full-year elementary schools? Is that starting to catch on in the United States? Where you go 12 months, you get 2-week breaks, so that you don't lose the lost education. You know, you hear these numbers that when your child leaves at the end of the year, it takes to like October 15th or 18th to basically get them where they left off. And other countries are doing the full-year schools. Is that becoming a trend in the United States?
They've talked about it for years. I think there are, especially some urban districts where they've done that, but overall, I would say no. And truthfully, if you look at the Midwestern part of the country, because of school funding, I have heard more school districts going to 4-day weeks, not only just Colorado, where they've had it for years, but in Oklahoma, where I spent years, there were a lot of school districts. As a matter of fact, there were a lot because of school funding that had gone to 4-day weeks. So it just depends on your locality. But generally, the days that you teach instructionally really do not increase a great deal, if any, because you will have 3 weeks off, you go, and I've been on year-round school, you'll have 3 weeks off, you go, 9 weeks, and then you'll have a shorter break, then you'll go again. So there's not a lot statistically to show that that summer slide, if you're offering summer programs, which we do, for children who can really benefit from that.
All right, thank you. Let's go, other services. This is again driven by special education, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. We currently, speech and language pathologists currently is a shortage area in the state of Connecticut. This year we had difficulty filling our openings, so we had to contract for about 3 FTEs of just contracted services to meet the demand of our speech and language IEPs. So that's primarily a huge reason why that number is.
Is this again, what's driving, is it an increase in the number of students that need these services?
It's an increase in the number of students who need the service and the amount of service that students require, as determined appropriate by their PPTs.
Again, have we changed the markers on this? Have we changed how they're?
There are state guidelines by which we determine students eligible for speech and language services that we have to abide by. So we are following our state guidelines. This is an area that we continually review with our staff. It was an area that was highlighted in our special education audit, and it's an area of future professional development. We're looking at that very closely. And then included in that increase is also, this year we've been challenged by students who are school avoidant, have difficulty getting to school consistently. So, we have to contract for some support for families and students to work with school on increasing attendance for students. An increase.
What does that mean?
What does that mean?
For students who have attendance issues, have difficulty getting to school for whatever reason, most often it's related to anxiety or some mental health issue, and it becomes chronic. We work with families to try to develop plans to increase students' attendance in school, to get them back into school, to re-engage them, and there are professional organizations out there who work with us, who do this kind of work, to work with families and school districts to do that kind of work. It's very labor intensive.
I would imagine.
And this also includes some one-to-one nursing that we had to contract for, and some reading support for students primarily who have dyslexia.
Anybody else on these? Let's go to transportation then. So I was surprised at this because I thought the increase was quite high, to be honest with you, because I knew there was a modest increase in the rate. Thank you, Mr. Mancuso. But this is going up pretty high. Can you talk to us? What's going on? What's driving this?
Another bus run.
The contractual increase was 2.5%. It's summer school transportation, which is special ed, and then just special ed transportation.
Well, what does that mean, though? Because, okay, so let me do this, right? 503, let's say that's a 5% increase. I know it's closer to that. Basically, I'm looking for you to explain like a $270,000 increase. About $230 of it is rate, and then there's an additional $270.
One is an additional bus for aquaculture that's been built in.
And how much is that?
That was a tier. That wasn't much. That was maybe 8,000.
Right, so we're really talking over $250,000 of other stuff.
There's $200,000 for summer school.
And explain that. Why is that new, or why is that an increase? What's going on there?
We are actually working with our attorney on who we do and do not actually transport in the summer to make sure that we understand that, and we believe that there will be a $200,000 increase for the students who are eligible for transportation in the summer.
So are they required to go to summer school? So these are, explain this to me, I'm not familiar with it.
Extended school year is provided to students who, again, are eligible for that service. And yes, we are required by law to offer that for children who qualify.
So that, would that fall under the realm again of special ed?
Yes.
Okay, and this is new, we're required, or is this?
Yeah, you can if you want, yeah.
Why don't you just
Bring up
stay
a new
here?
chair, Jeff, I mean, really.
This is not a new requirement. Like we were talking before about, how we could recover special education costs for students who, open choice students. We're also looking at our policies for providing students with disabilities with transportation to their summer programs when they're eligible for that service.
So what did we do in the past? What changed? Why all of a sudden we got a $200,000 increase? I'm just trying to get what changed.
I might answer that. When somebody asks us a question where we feel like we need a legal opinion, we gain that. And if we feel like we're trying to get the answer, whether or not we were providing transportation to the students who indeed qualified. And that is what that 200,000 is. It's additional busing in the summer.
So somebody's saying we weren't doing it, so you're trying to determine whether we have to do it.
That's correct. We try to make sure we stay within the law.
And if we have to do it, you've estimated that this is what the cost will be, but it's not yet determined that you must do it. Am I
That's
reading
correct.
between the lines?
No,
really
you're
well?
correct.
Yeah, we're looking into it really closely.
How many buses does that represent with $200,000 worth of incremental expense here?
More than one bus, right?
3 to 4.
3 or 4?
3 or 4 buses, so for 2 months, it'd be $50,000 a bus?
It depends on the size. These are probably smaller buses.
So does that mean there'd be more or less?
Well.
It's the same cost, but you fit fewer students on it.
So it really doesn't depend on the size in terms of the cost then, right? I'm trying to figure this out.
But there's more of them.
The busing is different according to the age of the children. If you have, for instance, hate to mention ECC again, but if you have the little ones, they have car seats, they're on small buses. If you have a child who is in a wheelchair, requires perhaps a different bus, we have to look at all of that. And so the type of bus is determined by the need.
Go ahead, Mr. Walsh.
How long is it going to take you to get that legal opinion? It doesn't seem like it should be a very well drawn out thing. I mean, it seems like a lawyer could figure this out in a week.
Yeah, we're keeping a list of the number of students who qualify for ESY services, and it won't take long to get that answer.
But what do you mean by long, Mr. McKee? A week from now? I mean, before we vote on the budget? What do you?
No, we're having annual review PPTs as we speak and ongoing to determine the number of students who qualify, and there is criteria for qualification for extended school year services or summer school for students with disabilities. So it's hopefully mid-May we will have a better idea because the PPTs are ongoing.
John's volunteering to be your legal counsel.
No, I'm not.
Good, we need an opinion Thursday or what?
So I was going to say, we can't get this by, when do we vote, April 1st?
Yeah.
Yeah, 3rd.
No?
No, we're working
Okay.
student by
All right,
student.
I hear
Yeah.
you.
Okay, so the legal decision, since you're working student by student, you're just trying to figure out what the expense is. It sounds like you have a legal opinion saying you have to pay for it. And I mean, it's maybe some yes, maybe some no, but you're doing it on a per pupil basis that you're going through PPTs for. You have some basis. Someone's told you you have to pay for this.
We know what's in the budget as far as the busing and what's in the budget. Part of that depends on a parent who had ESY last year may not have ESY this year. That may be a student who did qualify this year. They don't because they don't want the bus. They're going to do a different program with their own children. So we do believe, yes, that there is some obligation to pay for busing for some of our children, and we are planning for that so that we don't have a $200,000 hole in the budget when we start in September.
But there could be less than 200,000.
There could be, and if that were the case, that's, that's part of our transportation every year. It's like the aquaculture bus I mentioned. We may be adding a whole full route because more students move in one particular elementary, and we have to add a bus route.
Okay. With this change that has now just happened, is there any reason why in the write-up of this, you just didn't explain this? Because I feel like we're like pulling teeth here, trying to drill down on this issue of a $200,000 change, whereas items all over this thing for $25,000 and $42,000, you point right out, but we had to find this we've just wasted like 15 minutes trying to dig down and trying to figure out where this $200,000 is. Why didn't you just write this up in the description of a change that just happened, a legal change that just happened this year that's going to cost us $200,000?
Probably because when this was first written, we were just barely beginning the discussion. And that is one thing about the budget books. When the superintendent presents the budget, we try to update everything that we can. And I think you would admit that over the last couple of years, we've tried to add a lot more context in here for you to be of help. And we can certainly write that clear going into the following year if there's another increase.
All right. Tuition, I know there was some discussion of that already. It's modest.
Just one last question. Mr. Flynn, you were out of the room, but
Yeah.
what would you have estimated this wouldn't be except for the savings that you're getting from changing the way you're delivering those services? You would have expected, I thought you said something to the effect of last year it was 6-point-something% increase on that line?
I'm sorry, you have to ask, I don't know what you're asking.
On the tuition line.
Okay.
You pointed
Oh,
out
from
that that's where
17,
we're going
18.
to see the savings from all the things that you're bringing in-house, right?
Right. So on the gross budget from 17-18 to 18-19, when we came into this year, that's where you saw the 6% in tuition.
Yes.
And
So that's where we're seeing the savings.
yes, well, yes, it's very unusual to see this sort of no increase in tuition for us.
And are you expecting more children in this program? I mean, total number of students who are being for special education and things like that?
That goes back to that chart that was in,
Yep.
that's in the back, yeah. And we are actually holding really pretty level again, which will be fantastic if staff are able to do that. And this does also include tuition for we send 183 students out of the district for magnet and other programs, primarily Bridgeport, Trumbull.
Let's move on.
And I just want to ask one more question. So there's no way you can provide us with any type of analysis to show whether we're saving money by going in-house or not?
I think we even did that on the slide, but certainly we can have a stab to show you the different programs. 6 students, here's how much the program costs. That's all in the budget, so we can give you that, but not by individual student.
I don't think anybody's asking by
I
individual.
definitely don't want by individual student.
Yeah.
But what I'd like to see is,
What's the calc?
yeah, where the savings are, like show us where the savings are from the previous method of doing things to
Not-
where we are now.
Yeah.
And I presume the board would want the same thing.
And it's not just, here's what it's costing us, here's what we saved. It's what's the buildup? How are you saving it?
Well, and again, I'm going to go back and say children are not about savings. So when we talk, and I know that it's not that simplistic. And that's why on the special education slide, I tried to give you an example that has 25 students. That is the actual cost of that impact program. That is an estimated cost for 25 students at $65,000. So if you want to go, and that's the low end, that's $1 million for the impact program that we saved this school year. And truthfully, it's going to be higher than that because for many of those students, we would not have outplaced for $65,000.
It's not about savings, it's about efficiency. There's only so much of a pot of money to go around, and it continues to get divvied up and sliced up more and more. I give a lot of credit to the fact that there's some creative and innovative ways to not just have better programs, but to do it more efficiently, right? Because that's going to be required much more as we move forward because what's going on at the terrible state level.
Right.
And if they come down. So when I say savings, you
Right.
don't need to go into it's not about savings because it's the kids, okay? This is about efficiency because there's only so much to go around. There's been representations made that we're saving a whole ton of money on it. I have no reason to deny that that's happening, but I'd like to see what the cost buildup is so that we know that. So that when we get questioned as the Board of Finance out in public, we can say, Dr. Jones and her team are doing a great job. They're providing better programming and they're doing it in an efficient way.
Right, and I understand that, and I respect that, and I hope that, you can talk about now the tuition line and how it's holding flat, and how the school district did a self-imposed special education audit to have an outside organization look at the school district, and the school board committed $35,000 to do that work to make sure we were being efficient and also being open to where we need to be more efficient.
Who does that?
It was a company actually hired for us.
Yeah, it was a company called Futures out of Springfield,
And all they do is
Massachusetts.
special education audits?
Well, they've been doing special education audits for years.
I'm just asking what else they do.
Yeah, I don't know if they do anything else, but I know that they do special education audits, and not just in New England, but they do it all over the country.
Can I just, one thing?
Yeah.
Because Mr. Flynn's point is valid, if somebody asks a question, right? And I get there was a study done, but for me, there's an uptick in auditory needs, $200,000. There's an extra $200,000 in busing. Does that chip away at that $1 million? Has that all been accounted for? Those feel like things that are adding to the budget because we brought kids back into the system, chipping away at that $1 million. I think that's kind of where.
Yeah, it is very complex, and when you bring a
Yeah, there's a
student
lot of
back,
moving
it's,
parts, yeah.
I mean, they're on a bus locally instead of a bus going an hour away, so it is complex, and every student is different, and I will say, I think Mr. Mancusi, again, and his department, and our families are really working together, and we're averaging 12% of our students in special education. The state average is 14, and I think that's because everyone is really trying to work together to make sure we're providing what our kids need.
And when I asked for the analysis, I guess this has been a change on how you have wanted to deliver special education services and what you've wanted to do. And we followed you down that path. I mean, I don't think we fought you on it because it sounded great. But there's got to be some, I guess, some type of analysis that you can put on a page for us as opposed to, I mean, and you did a great job of explaining how that increase in tuition should have been a lot higher. But seeing the whole thing mapped out on like a page, and it's not about, it's just, what are the efficiencies to show that the program is working?
I think it's hard because we never got to the point that all these children left and then came back. So if they all left and then we put the program in place and they all came back, then it'll be easy to say this is how much money we saved.
Okay.
But we've just been servicing these children all along. And it really just comes down to trusting the educators to know that if we didn't have these programs in place, we would have to outplace them. And this is what the tuition is. So it is, I know it's the cost avoidance and saving money is slightly different, but in this case.
A lot different, yeah.
It's a lot different, but I think that you wouldn't necessarily get the savings.
I don't disagree.
And I think
don't
that that's
disagree
where
with the point.
we're not trying to not give you the information that you want. And I think that where Dr. Jones maybe pushed back, that there might only be a few number of students that actually left and then came back, and if we gave you that information, it might be easy to identify those students, so we'll.
It's really important to understand that when you do build in internal capacity or programming in district, it really is investing in students that are currently in your district, and it's preventing outplacements. The benefit of running high-quality programs in district is that you're able to, when appropriate, when families agree that it's appropriate with you, to bring kids back. But really the primary, you're primarily developing in-district programs to prevent future outplacements.
All right. Let's go on to other purchased services. Professional development curriculum writing. So is this by contract, the professional growth tuition for teachers?
Bus routing software.
Yes, that 30,000 is for tuition.
required
Yes,
by the contract?
yes.
Mr. Brown, can you take over?
Any other questions on this category? Okay. We're on supplies.
Can I just ask one question? Why isn't all the professional development done at the beginning of the year so that the students can get the benefit of it throughout the year?
And I'll answer, it's done all year. It's done in the summer, it's done during the year. It's done all the time. And part of it has to do, if we have a curriculum that's going to roll out next September, we'll do the summer work in preparation for that. So it's all cyclical depending on what we're working on. So it's traditionally, you will do work in the summer in preparation for the following year.
Okay. But the federal government's about to roll out a program in which they're going to be willing to pay for some of this tuition stuff so that it's not all in-house stuff. Where they're going to, I just watched the education secretary talk about this the other night, where she was saying that one of the biggest challenges they've noticed across the United States is on professional development and how the teachers don't feel like they really get a lot of bang for their buck, and they find it kind of wasteful where they could go and take tuition classes some other place and learn a lot more. And they're going to be they've already put money in a budget so that teachers can take professional development classes to learn specific areas they feel like they need to be developed in.
Yeah, we already do that in this region, and there are other parts of the country. If you go to the Midwest, even California, a lot of those areas, especially where you don't have bargaining state, you don't get reimbursement for tuition at all. So I'm not optimistic that the federal government will provide us more in Fairfield County than what we're able to do for our staff. If they do, that would be terrific. But the tuition aspect here, our teachers are able to do that.
Do you think that teachers are happy with the professional development program the way it is right now?
I think professional development can always be improved, and it depends on which teacher you ask. We had teachers last year in the summer that did an inquiry academy before the year started. They said it was the best professional development they'd ever done. Then you'll have teachers who, will go to a workshop series, not necessarily hosted by us, and, it's not great. And for every teacher, it's very unique and individualized, and they all learn differently.
And then some of it's done in-house where, like, a teacher will say how she's handling something in a class and best practices kind of thing.
Well, we have professional learning community where they come together. It's part of their plan time during the week. They problem solve together. They learn from one another. They write curriculum together depending on every Tuesday. We, have professional development on Tuesdays. We have some early releases where it's very focused.
All right. I mean, the teachers I've spoken to have not been, it's a problem area they've talked about where they don't feel like on these half days they're getting much out of it at all. And it just seems to take a considerable amount of programming from the students away.
Well, it was put in, we increased it over the last couple of years because our teachers requested it. And so that is not what we hear overall from teachers. Now, I'm not going to say you're not going to have a teacher that doesn't like any of the professional development that we do. I would think that we would be an unusual school district if everybody loved it. But overwhelmingly, I think if we tried to take our early releases away, they would not be happy, because the vast majority of our teachers do use that time, and they use it effectively to work with one another and to learn and grow.
Okay, we're to page 39, supplies, text, materials. Any questions on this page? So, back to Mr. DeWitt.
I'm disappointed to see that the only budget item that's actually going down is the stuff that's actually touching the kids. Supplies, text, and materials, $420,000. So, help me out with this one. $419,000 of instructional supplies. It says there's a decrease for NGSS. I've lived in the military for 30 years, and I swear to God, I thought I heard every acronym there. What is NGSS?
Next Generation Science Standards.
Oh, got it. So help me out with a reduction in instructional supplies and materials?
We have had this line item in the budget last year and this year to help our teachers prepare, primarily in secondary, to purchase the materials that they need for next generation science standards. Next year, we're in a different place and we don't feel like we need that large item. That's an area we were able to reduce. We've been focused on that the last 2 years, and our curriculum area next year is not as expensive. On the supplies and materials area, that's really the per pupil allocation, and where high school's growing, so their allocation is up, elementary has fewer students, and it's actually allocated per student. So some of the buildings go down because they're not.
Just by pure volume?
By pure enrollment.
And the salary line item went up, and that has the most direct contact with students. So to say that teachers,
What's that?
well, you said that you were disappointed that this is the one item that touches the students, and it's going down. And the
Oh,
teach-
you're saying the teacher,
Yes,
oh.
so the teachers
I
really
get it.
drive everything, and you should be happy that we are investing in that.
Yeah, okay. I don't buy that, sorry. I don't think it's the same thing, frankly. I mean, material, book in front of me, it's your teacher's there for 8, however many hours a day, whether they're making, X or Y, so. Okay, thanks.
All right, anybody else on supplies, text, or materials? Seeing none, the next line item is operations, maintenance, and buildings. We already went through this one, so I'm going to skip it. Capital. There's description here. The increases in both capital outlay and technology. The interior boom, that's not something you can borrow from the town? Do you know if the town has one?
Mr. Cullen, if you'd like to come talk about your boom.
What is this, your parting gift? There's going to be the Tom Cullen Memorial Boom?
Gift.
Jeff, did you put him up to that?
Tom Cullen Boom.
We were going to name a lavatory after you, but I guess we can do the boom.
Make it Dwight's.
Great, it'll get done in 20 years.
Interior boom lift is something that our maintenance department requested because we rent one 5 or 6 times a year. And we've done that for the past at least 5 or 6 years that I've been here.
What do you use it for? Where
It's a lot of the schools that have a really high area that we can't reach interior, so lobby areas, stairwells, to get up to light fixtures, ceiling pads.
How are you going to truck this all over town?
So-
Does this come with a,
No, it's on wheels and we have a trailer.
you do have a
Bring
trailer,
one,
thank
yep.
you, that's the word I was looking for. Okay. Questions, comments on this item? Mr. Walsh?
Does capital outlay also cover lost or destroyed or stolen Chromebooks? Or is that covered under technology?
That's your theft one.
Chromebooks, he said.
Are you asking specifically if the theft of Chromebooks, technology?
Yeah, like replacement of Chromebooks. Like how many Chromebooks have you had to replace this year after they've already been given to children? How many are they going to buy next year? Exactly. And then what's like,
Yeah, right.
what's the average? Yeah,
Is there a
exactly.
10% replacement factor or something?
I remember you gave us this number last year when we went through the Chromebooks, and I guess we just got to see whether how this is all working.
Yeah, let me try to find it.
I don't know the answer to that. We'd have to look that. I know we answered it. It's in one of the written responses to one of the boards, but I don't remember what the number was.
Let me see, I'll find it.
One, 179,
See at the bottom there?
As far as you ask about the number, for the repair and replacement. 21 units with non-warranty repairs were losses to date when we did our Q&A. Those units were used for parts for other in-house repairs, such as replacements of cracked screens. And we had 21 non-warranty, 113 warranty for 6 in-house repair for a total of 140 is where we were.
And then how many Chromebooks are you going to be buying per year? Is this number on page 153? I don't even know how to read this thing.
Where was I here? Sorry, I gotta find it. Is Mr. Honahan still here? Yeah. Do you have that number in front of you? I know it's in front of me, I just can't find it.
Tom Honahan, Executive Director of Digital Learning. The Chromebooks that we're looking for grade 6 and for grade 7 is 1,600, and that would supply for all the students.
167? Is that what you said, sir?
1,600.
No, 1,600.
Total. That's how many we totally have, or are those new ones you're going to be purchasing?
That would be new ones.
Because you're expanding the program to 6 and 7?
That's the intention, yes.
What's the total cost of that then?
The total cost of how much?
Looks like it's $1 million in total for the program, saving the traditional cart model. They're calculating a savings of $700,000. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So that's the total program, but the annual cost you're looking at, I think, what are you looking at, buying like $300,000 worth? Or 1,500, 1,541?
Oh, after this.
Yeah, when you already have it in place.
$203.
We're expecting lower overall cost. The per unit cost that we're projecting for the Chromebooks moving is $225. And yes, that'll increase, but it is much less than what we were expecting if we were having a laptop.
No, but how many are you buying this year, is the question?
For the
For
coming...
the next fiscal year?
For the next fiscal year,
budget.
we're looking for 1,600.
Right, so it's rough number, between $300,000 and $400,000 you're going to be spending on Chromebooks.
Well, we're anticipating that the Chromebooks will last, the operating system will last 6 years, so we're looking to take a high school device that has been in high school for 4 years, and then we'll start redeploying that. So we'll have an opportunity to shift the resources throughout the district as we move forward. So we're
I
expected...
understand, but you're saying it still goes with, you're looking to buy 1,600 Chromebooks in the next fiscal year.
Correct.
At a little over $200 a Chromebook.
Correct, which we would expect to last...
You don't have to give me that.
360,000.
Right, so $360,000. Fine. Then you can go into you're looking at a 6-year replacement cycle. I'm not sure I buy that, but fine. That's your working assumption is, so you're looking at a $360,000 a year deal here, right, for the Chromebooks. Okay. Mr. Walsh?
But on page 152 at the bottom, the acquisition of technology equipment to support the curriculum, it's $450,427. Is that the cost of the Chromebooks plus other things?
Yeah, it says down the bottom, Wacom tablets for high school art, display systems for high school restaurants, and infrastructures and projection systems.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
That's okay.
answer for you, but that's what I assumed.
Digital display systems for high school restaurants, what is that? Is that a program that's a new program?
Display systems would be something similar to when you walk into the main lobby. They would have a menu or some sort of ability to actually do some sort of instruction as well. So display systems is something that they had requested over time.
But the restaurants are not new. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking.
No, we know that.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Mr. Walsh, any other questions?
That's it for right now.
Anybody else? Ms. Esmond?
Thank you. Going back to page 43 in capital outlay, what's an example of something that is stolen or damaged for which there's no ability to recoup either by insurance or some other protection? The little write-up on the side in capital outlay.
Mr. Cullen, would that be like a ladder or a drill or something like that? No? Okay. He's looking.
I sure am glad we're replacing the yoga classroom wall mirrors.
Now, that's
That's
when we
an
kept
important
taking
one.
off, right?
Yeah.
The last 2 years, we've got to fix it.
Well, got to make sure people can see themselves do the downward dog there.
Make sure the glass doesn't break on them.
No, I'm not sure everything that covers. I do know that the insurance coverage we have with the town is, it has a deductible. And a lot of times, if we don't meet the deductible, we can't really file it, so we have to pay for it.
Okay, so you've created a separate fund just to
Yeah.
capture those
Yep.
costs. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing that the last item is dues and fees, and that's relatively flat, and it's a very modest amount. So we've gone through the entire object code budget. I'll open it up now for any other questions on the budget.
Dues and fees is relatively flat. It's other than the 50,000
Yeah,
that they're adding for the search.
it's actually with that, it's flat. It stays at like 85.
Now it's proposed for 132 from
No, I
82.
thought-
From 82, it's a
What's the page?
60% increase. Page 140, page 45.
The 50,000 is that superintendent
Yeah,
search?
it's a
Okay.
60%
Yeah,
increase.
yeah, yeah.
61% increase.
Sorry, I misunderstood what you were saying.
So just the increase is the 50,000.
That's correct.
Are there expenses being paid for this year for the search? Has that search begun? Have we expended any funds, or are we going to expend the funds before the end of the year?
We'll expend some funds. We've just, at our last meeting, decided on a search firm to hire.
Okay.
We haven't signed the contract yet, but we're hoping to split that cost between, the consultant fee was around $24,000, so that, part of that will be in this fiscal year.
Okay. Is that similar to the last time we did this search?
Yes.
Okay.
One last thing I'd like to do,
Getting-
obviously open it up, go ahead, Mr.
Yep.
Duet.
On page 76, number 50, Walter Fitzgerald Campus. So I understand our lease is up, because on page 40, it says the increase is for the new negotiated annual lease. So the lease goes up from, it looks like 100,000 to 110. But it says $200,000 of maintenance. We don't own that building, right?
No, I don't know, Mr. Cullen, if you want to chime in, feel free. We put in 200,000 in case we, as we're working on the contract with the real estate development firm. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and they're supposed to be bringing a proposal for the board. They're supposed to have it to us by February. We're hoping we'll have it by May. So the cost could go up.
So you mean the lease cost, or we think we're going to maintain their building for them?
No. The plan is, we had a meeting with the Bridgeport Archdiocese that are in charge of the St. Emery School and church. And this was in October. And they brought a real estate division part of their program with them to talk to us about a new long-term lease where they would make some of the renovations and upgrades that we've been complaining about, do them themselves or with contractors, and then provide us a new lease that would probably be an increase in cost that would pay for that over time, like 10, 20 years. So what we did is we met with them and gave them about a 3-page list with about 20 items on it, things that we've been complaining about, and the building hasn't been maintained in a very long time, and they're supposed to be working on that. I've been in contact with them every couple of weeks to see how they're doing. They're providing about 3 or 4 of the 20 items so far. So in the meantime, we negotiated with the town to talk to them about a one-year extension till we could get this all done. So we
is
put a
there
placeholder in. We put a placeholder in for an increase in the lease and the potential that they would fall out of this project we're working with them on, and we would have to do a couple of the things to keep the building in at least decent shape.
So at what point financially does it not make sense to go back to St. Emery's? Is that what it is? I mean, how many kids are at the facility? I don't even know. Is it a large
Around
facility?
50.
It can hold up to 50.
It's around 50.
So at what point does that, I mean, it's twice the number of the yearly lease.
The
It just
problem is-
sticks out at me, you know.
The problem is finding a place
Right.
or a building that's, because I know that you've reached out to the diocese and inquired about other buildings.
Yeah, we have. We worked with some real estate companies to look at a lot of different places. But we put money into St. Emery's to move them in there. And now it's been so long that, you know, the carpeting is 20-something years old. We tried to add another AC split unit for a new classroom that the school wanted to start a program for, and the panels maxed out. We just had a toilet break there that we looked at first. It's the pipe under the slab, so it's not something we can do easily. The roof leaks, so there's a lot of issues, but
Wow, we can't find a better building than that. It sounds.
it's tough.
Any other,
Anyone know Mr. Barnhart? I mean, he's got a lot of buildings, right?
The lease has been agreed to at a 5% increase, and as Tom Collins was pointing out, the town and the diocese are working to try to put together a long-term plan. Obviously, what that long-term plan turns out to be will determine our next steps. But that's hopefully to be done sometime this spring.
But
But in the meantime, it's secured for another year at a 5% increase.
Are you proposing, though, that there might be a situation, if we approve this, where you would rent the building for one more year for $110,000, and during that year, put $200,000 into the building for that 1 year, just for the diocese to then keep that
No.
$200,000 worth of improvements?
Our intention would
Okay.
be to do a few things, probably just under 100,000, but we would do some things to spruce it up. We would certainly bring the electrical up to code so we can add another split unit air conditioning unit. We thought a fresh coat of paint, fix the broken toilet in the boys' room, some of those things if we had to.
All for $100,000 on a $100,000 lease.
With an increase. I guess the increase is for the exceptional maintenance program they're enacting.
I don't know. I mean, how long have we been in the building?
A long time, over 10 years.
Right. How much money have we put into it?
The lease started at 50,000 and then
not the
grew.
lease, how much in capital improvements? I think is-
We have not. When we moved in there, we did a project, I want to say it was around 120 to 150,000 to move them in there and set them up. But through the years, we've done very, very little.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Dwight? One of the last items that I have, can we turn to page 119? Mr. Manzella, I'd like to thank you. You did all the hard work on this over the course of the years. This is the budget by program. So here, attempts to put together how much we spend. I had a few questions, and forgive me if I've asked these before. General instruction, is that elementary school education? Salaries and that, or what's that?
What number is it?
Line 1129.
1129, yeah.
Well, it says up on top, general instruction 1129 includes a variety of special instruction classifications such as ELL,
it.
gifted, VOAG. Okay.
Thank you for that, I didn't see that.
Mhm.
Okay, so where is, well, elementary school is spread throughout, including salaries, correct? The 2520 is the benefits for the district, because that doesn't get spread around, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Have there been any changes to this methodology year over year, or it stayed pretty consistent?
It's pretty consistent. I don't think much has changed.
Right. So, I mean, you can see where our funds are going. You can see where the increases are all coming. Wow. Questions, comments, concerns from anyone on this?
This is a nice overview for the head count and everything, too.
Yep.
Shows the 4 heads for special education. So special education this year is going to be the biggest driver of FTEs. 304.7. I guess it was last year, too, wasn't it?
It's the largest increase in terms of percentage, too.
Yep,
I think,
sure is.
Except for maintenance of plant. Any comments on this? Does the Board of Ed look at this at all?
I look at everything.
Mrs. Vitale?
We look at everything. We do.
And what were your thoughts?
Well, I think for special education, it's,
Not just special ed, I meant the overall, how we're spending our funds here by program. Did you guys have discussions over that?
we didn't discuss this page as much as looking at the initiatives at the beginning of the book, the program initiatives that are driving this year's budget in terms of staffing and professional development. So we don't necessarily start at the back, we start at the front and work forward.
I just find it a fascinating overview to see where the dollars are going, where we're spending, and I know there's discussion behind each of them, I get it. But to look at the various programs and see the level of spending relative to each other and relative to where the dollars are going, I think is really fascinating. Anybody have any other comments on this page?
The big thing for me is, like you said, Mr. Flynn, 1129 went down, 1200 went up. Those are the only two numbers that really moved. Except for very small, like you said, maintenance of plant would have won. But our general instruction is going down, and that's, general instruction is variety of special instruction programs gifted. But that's just that's teachers that's every teacher except for special ed teachers, right?
Well, the
Or am I-
notable surprises here to me are things like technology education is so low as compared to some of the others.
Yeah, that's
right.
Yeah.
And then you look and you say, we're spending almost as much in music as we are in science, and we're spending more than we are in social studies, and as much as we are in English, 7th grade English, and more than we are in reading and language arts. I mean, I'm not making any, I'm just fascinated by it. I'm not making any, that's not a qualitative. Right, it's just when you look at it like this, it would certainly spur discussion.
And I think you need to look at it year to year based on what curriculum area the focus is on.
I get it, but look at, the differences aren't so large so that it moves the needle in most of the categories in terms of ranking of where you're spending your dollars by program. Right, social studies was 3956, it's 3993. Music was 4313 to 4333. Math went up a little bit. I think there was a bit of curriculum there, right?
I might add, though, you have to be really careful about looking at it that
Nope,
way.
I understand.
Because the social studies where you see 46, and then you go up to music where it's 47.2, it's only 1.2 But if you look at the dollar difference, that just has to do with you may have more teachers with their masters and 15-year veterans in one of those categories, where another one has more entry-year teachers.
I understand. It's an interesting way to look at where the funds go. I know there's explanations. I'm not the Board of Education, so it's not my job to decide this, but if I was on the board, you're darn tootin' that this would be a schedule that I'd be diving into to understand it better. Anybody else?
Just a question on world language. Are we teaching language in third grade?
It starts in
Is that what
third.
that is? Sorry?
Starts in third.
Starts in third grade? Spanish, French, whatever?
Spanish starts in third.
Okay.
See?
See?
Anybody else? Any other questions to wrap up the evening?
Oh, yeah.
So we had some requests of you, and maybe as we go through the books a little bit more with this in our mind, we might have a few more that come our way. I would like to thank you guys. It's been a late night. We appreciate all the time and effort. Mrs. Mansell, please, thank you very much. Thank your staff very much for all their hard work and effort. Board of Education, I thank you for being here this evening. And you can. Let me finish my thank yous, and then you can ask. Mr. Cullen, Godspeed. Best of luck to you. We'll be cursing you out. Everything next year will be your fault, along with the superintendent's. Just know that as you leave. But you're
Mr.
going to be in
Chair?
Virginia. She's going to be in Greenwich. We know where to find her.
That toilet at St. Emery's got his name written all over it.
Yeah, you'll be at Appomattox Courthouse. We will find you there for the surrender. We'll go to Mr. Mayor, and then we'll go to Mr. Walsh.
We have 2 more budget items. We have-
Okay, well, we'll do that after.
we have
Go
the
ahead,
pri-
Mr. Walsh.
Yeah, we have the private,
Private school busing. I didn't see Mr. Fickey here.
and the nurses, the health services.
Okay, so are they represented here? Where?
Me and Rob.
Okay, let's go through those real quick. Pages?
115 and 137 in the town budget book.
Okay. Questions, comments, concerns from anybody?
Sorry, what page?
115 and 117.
Our budget book?
Yeah, that's a
Oh,
museum.
and 115's Fairfield Museum and History.
Yeah, I looked at it at one point.
It's under not public safety. It's under health and welfare, isn't it?
Health and Welfare Services, health.
136, 136.
Sorry.
136.
Is it 136?
136 and 136.
There you go.
Yeah,
Okay.
135, 136.
35 and 136.
Questions, comments, anybody?
135, 137. I got the 3 with the 1 mixed up, obviously.
School
Yeah, it's the
psychologist.
proposed. Anybody on private busing? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to Health and Welfare Services. Anything there? Can read the description. I don't have anything. Anybody? No. All right, Mr. Walsh, you had a comment?
Well,
A question?
I might need Mr. Mayor's help on this, but this gets back to your question, Mr. Flynn, earlier on the per pupil expenditure chart. There's other expenses on the town side that we pay for education, correct?
About 24 million.
Okay. Is there a way to get the numbers, what other districts pay for that, so that we can map that against, on top of the chart?
Good question.
And
It's
then get down.
included in-
and
It's
then-
included in per pupil expenses.
Oh,
The 24 million's included.
Yeah.
That's already included. Okay, great.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, that's a state.
And then,
Yeah.
and then I guess to follow up on page 4, where you list all the different town services you use, when you say attorney issues, I thought you guys had your own attorney.
It depends, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, one of them's in human resources, right? The human resources director, you're supposedly saving money by paying her more money and saving legal expenses.
We do, but it's, for instance, if we go out to bid, like we went out for transportation bid, and if there is an issue that needs review, the town attorney, or the town
Okay.
help with that.
So it's just some of the legal services, not all of them?
Not all, no.
Right.
And we don't actually pay additional. I just want to clarify. We have our HR and legal services. We just rolled it into one position,
Yes.
but it's the executive salary, just like it has always been. It's not,
Okay.
we don't pay more.
Okay. Is there going to be a savings, well, Mr. Collins already left, with Mr. Cullen's position being filled?
We don't know yet. It will depend on, the candidate and where they come in. Executive salaries are pretty similar, so I would be shocked to do his job if it were a lot less.
Well, normally on the town side, like he's had increases all along. Somebody with 17 years' experience in the district, raises all along. His position's changed. He's gotten, whatever. On the town side, when we've replaced positions, we see like 20 to 25% savings sometimes in regards to bringing somebody in a little less experienced, not somebody who's at the end of their tenure and about to retire.
Sometimes that happens. I mean, the HR job was a prime example where when Ms. Deasy started, she was younger in her career, so we're actually getting legal services included, less than we would have been paying, the other position. But his position requires a very high skill set, so it'll just depend on the candidate pool. We have a large pool.
Okay, and then on the services that the town supplies, does our town supply more or less the exact same services that every other town provides their Board of Education?
I would say every locality is a little bit different.
Okay.
We're just, it's very difficult to compare.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else? Seeing none, once again,
you.
our thanks. And do I have a motion? We'll take Mr. DeWitt, we'll second Mr. Mottola. All in favor of adjournment? Opposed, abstentions? Good night, everybody. Thank you.